The Galactic Empire's doomsday warfleet poured from swirling warp portals above Earth, filling the sky with ominous alien battleships. Humanity's first encounter with the Vidians was an ultimatum blaring from every screen on the planet: kneel or burn. Captain Vincent Coleman stared in stunned disbelief as the Vidian armada eclipsed the sun. He was returning triumphant from man's first mission to Pluto when the invasion hit. His spacecraft sensors lit up as wave after wave of Vidian warships emerged from hyperspace, disgorging from twisting blue rifts. A booming alien voice crackled over every frequency, drowning out the mission control chatter. Hysteria and panic gripped the globe. People stampeded through the streets as emergency sirens wailed. The Vidian ships hovered over every major city like storm clouds, weapons primed and ready to fire. World leaders scrambled in crisis, desperate to make sense of this apocalyptic first contact. Nobody had a plan for hostile alien invasion. Vincent fought his damaged spacecraft through the chaos, dodging falling orbital debris and anti-aircraft fire, as he made a desperate landing at the UN building in New York. He sprinted into the General Assembly, still wearing his spacesuit, shoving past stunned guards. The gathered world leaders turned in shock as Vincent burst onto the stage. Emperor Ector's hologram flickered to life above the assembly. The translucent alien towered 20 feet tall, glaring down with cold reptilian eyes. "You have 1 Earth hour to signal your total capitulation." Ecton's forked tongue flicked out as he raised a clawed fist. "Or I will burn your cities to ash and sear the defiance from your bones." The UN chamber dissolved into shouting. Some leaders wanted to surrender and beg for mercy. Others demanded humanity fight to the last. Vincent looked into the sea of terrified faces. He knew submission to the Vidians would doom mankind to an eternity of slavery and suffering. There was only one choice. Vincent grabbed the microphone, voice booming. "Humans of Earth, I've seen the capabilities of this alien empire. If we bow to them, the human race will become cattle beaten down for generations." He gestured to the bristling Vidian warships eclipsing the sky. "But if we stand together and fight, we still have a chance. They can bomb our cities, but they'll never bomb our spirit." A grim silence fell over the chamber. Vincent waited, heart pounding, as the world held its breath. The words that came next would set the course of human history. It all hung on this moment: submission or defiance, surrender or war. The assembly erupted with shouts and cheers. Vincent almost collapsed with relief. The human race had chosen to fight, to make a stand against impossible odds, to refuse to go quietly into the dark night of extinction at the hands of alien overlords. The titanic battle for Earth was about to begin. Every man, woman, and child would be a soldier in the war to save humanity, to victory or death. The Vidian warships opened fire. Searing plasma rained down on Earth's cities, vaporizing millions in seconds. But the humans were already scrambling to strike back. ICBMs and nuclear warheads streaked into the sky, detonating in blinding flashes. Vidian ships exploded into flames, blown apart by atomic blasts. Half the alien fleet dissolved into fireballs that lit up the sky brighter than the sun. The Vidians were shocked that the primitive humans dared to resist. Ector shrieked with rage as his burning ships fell from orbit. He ordered a full invasion, dropping hordes of battle droids into the rubble of Earth's scorched cities. The mechanized Vidian forces marched over mountains of human corpses, declaring Earth pacified. But the humans rose from the ashes like vengeful phoenixes. Every man, woman, and child took up arms. Old rivalries and hatreds were forgotten as all of Earth united against the alien threat. Vincent led the global resistance, rallying the human survivors to stand strong. Block by block, city by city, the humans clawed back their planet, fighting the Vidians in brutal urban warfare. Emperor Ector had one last atrocity to unleash. A salvo of antimatter bombs scorched the Earth, burning great cities into craters of molten slag, killing billions. Human civilization collapsed into ruin and anarchy. The Vidians thought the hairless apes of Earth were finally broken. But they were wrong. Oh, so wrong. From the rubble and radiation, the human resistance fought on with implacable fury. Vincent and the human armies waged a guerrilla war of survival against the alien occupiers. The battle for humanity's future raged on, and now the Vidians were learning the terrible cost of declaring war against the men and women of Earth. The ruins of Chicago stretched out before Vincent as he crouched atop a crumbling skyscraper. Smoke rose from scattered fires, and the constant hum of Vidian ships filled the air. He peered through binoculars at a nearby alien outpost, its force field shimmering in the hazy light. "Ready for this?" he asked the ragtag group behind him. Sarah, his second-in-command, nodded grimly. "As we'll ever be." Vincent gave the signal. Dozens of resistance fighters emerged from hiding spots in the rubble, converging on the Vidian base. They moved swiftly and silently, years of guerrilla warfare evident in their practiced motions. Plasma bolts suddenly lit up the night. The humans scattered, returning fire with stolen Vidian weapons. Vincent led the charge, dodging energy blasts as he sprinted toward the force field generator. Sarah and her team laid down suppressing fire as Vincent planted the explosive charges. He dove clear just as the generator exploded in a ball of blue flame. The force field flickered and died. The resistance fighters swarmed into the base. Close-quarters combat erupted as humans and Vidians clashed in the corridors. Vincent fought his way to the command center, dispatching alien soldiers with grim efficiency. "We're in," he called over the radio. "Kai, work your magic." The tech specialist's fingers flew over the alien console. "Almost got it. There." A piercing shriek filled the air as hundreds of hunter-seeker drones suddenly activated. But instead of attacking the humans, they turned on their Vidian masters. Chaos erupted as the deadly machines tore through alien ranks. Vincent allowed himself a moment of savage satisfaction before ordering the retreat. They'd struck a blow, but he knew the war was nowhere near the end. Weeks later, emboldened by their success, Vincent led an all-out assault on a major Vidian stronghold. The battle raged for days, but in the end, the humans' fury and desperation proved too much for the aliens' superior technology. As the last Vidian fell, Vincent stood amid the carnage, his face etched with grim perseverance. There would be no mercy today. But their victory was short-lived. Emperor Ector's retaliation was swift and merciless. A new plague swept through human populations, killing indiscriminately. Even the resistance wasn't spared. Vincent watched helplessly as his comrades succumbed one by one. The moans of the dying filled their hidden base, a former subway station deep beneath the city. "We have to do something," Sarah rasped, her skin pale and clammy from the virus. He assembled a small team for a desperate raid on a Vidian research facility. They fought their way through automated defenses and alien guards, racing against time. In the chaos of alarms and weapons fire, Vincent found himself separated from the others. He sprinted down sterile corridors, searching frantically for the lab. There, a vial of glowing blue liquid, the antidote. Clutching his prize, Vincent ran. Explosions rocked the facility as he escaped, realizing with a sinking heart that he'd lost contact with his team. Back at the resistance base, the antidote allowed their scientists to develop a treatment, but the cost had been severe. Their numbers were devastated, their spirit battered. As Vincent tended to the survivors, a massive hologram flickered to life above the ruined city. Emperor Ector's reptilian visage loomed over them, his forked tongue flicking as he spoke. "Vincent Coleman, your tenacity is not impressive. I offer you a choice. Surrender yourself, and your people may live as subjects of the Empire. Refuse, and I will crush what remains of your pathetic resistance." Vincent's fists clenched as he stared up at the alien tyrant. He knew Ector couldn't be trusted, but as he looked around at the haggard, desperate faces of the survivors, he wondered if they had any real choice left. In a dimly lit room deep underground, the resistance leaders gathered. The weight of uncounted dead seemed to press down on them all. "But how many more will die if we keep fighting?" another leader countered. Vincent listened silently, the burden of command heavy on his shoulders. As the argument raged on, he stepped outside, gazing up at the alien-filled sky. The fate of humanity rested on his next decision, and he had no idea what to do. Vincent paced the dimly lit war room, Emperor Ector's ultimatum echoing in his mind. The remaining resistance leaders sat around a battered table, their faces haggard from years of brutal conflict. "We can't seriously be considering this," Marcus Ramirez growled, smacking his fist on the table. "The Vidians will enslave us all the moment Vincent turns himself in." "And what's our alternative?" Sarah countered, her voice weary. "How many more will die if we keep fighting?" Vincent opened his mouth to respond, when alarms suddenly blared throughout the base. He sprinted to the command center, heart racing. On the main view screen, a battered Vidian warship descended from the sky. "They found us," someone whispered in horror. But instead of opening fire, the ship broadcast a message. "This is Admiral Zor-El. I request an immediate meeting with Vincent Coleman." The room erupted in chaos. "It's a trap!" Marcus shouted. Vincent held up his hand for silence. "Maybe, but we need to hear them out." Hours later, Vincent stood face to face with Admiral Zor-El in a hastily arranged meeting site. The Vidian's scaled skin glistened in the harsh light as he spoke. "Not all of us support Ector's madness," Zor-El said. "A growing faction of officers seek to overthrow him. We need your help, and in return we offer Earth its freedom." Vincent's mind reeled. Could he trust this alien? Or was it another Vidian deception? He turned to Marcus, whose face was etched with suspicion. "It could be our only shot," Vincent said quietly. Marcus shook his head. "Or it could doom us all." Vincent took a deep breath and faced Zor-El. "We accept your alliance, but if you betray us, I swear I'll kill you myself." The next weeks were a whirlwind. Zor-El's rebels provided the humans with advanced weaponry beyond their wildest dreams. Vincent led joint strike teams, human and Vidian, fighting side by side. They hit Ector's antimatter bomb factories on Proxima Centauri, reducing them to radioactive slag. On Tau Ceti, they freed thousands of slaves from Ector's mining operations. But their victories came at a cost. Ector's fury knew no bounds when he discovered Zor-El's betrayal. The Emperor's voice boomed across every channel. "I will crush this pathetic rebellion and mount Zor-El's head on my throne." Vincent and Zor-El scrambled to fortify their stronghold as Ector's massive fleet approached. Vincent addressed the assembled troops, human and Vidian alike. "This is our last stand," he shouted. "Everything we fought for comes down to this moment. We fight not just for Earth, but for every world Ector has enslaved. We fight for freedom." A deafening cheer went up as Ector's ships darkened the sky. Waves of battle droids swarmed their defenses. Vincent found himself in the thick of the fighting, blaster in hand as he cut down Vidian loyalists. Through the chaos he saw Marcus go down, a massive Vidian mech looming over him. Vincent fought his way to his friend's side, dragging the wounded Marcus to safety. A blinding flash lit up the sky. Vincent looked up in horror to see Zor-El's flagship on a collision course with Ector's command ship. The antimatter explosion vaporized both vessels instantly, shattering the Vidian fleet. In the stunned silence that followed, Vincent seized his chance. "Now!" he roared. "Push them back!" Human and rebel Vidian alike surged forward in a final desperate charge. The loyalist forces, leaderless and in disarray, crumbled before their onslaught. When the dust settled, Vincent could hardly believe it. Against impossible odds, they had won. Earth was free. Earth's victory against the Vidians was short-lived. Vincent Coleman stood in the rebuilt United Nations headquarters, gazing out at the New York skyline. The city had risen from the ashes, a testament to human resilience. But now, a new threat loomed. Alarms blared. Vincent sprinted to the command center, where holographic displays showed a terrifying sight. Strange angular ships appeared in orbit, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. A technician's voice shook. "Unknown vessels, sir. They're not responding to hails." Before Vincent could reply, blinding flashes erupted across the sky. Antimatter warheads detonated, vaporizing Earth's orbital defenses. Shipyards and space stations disintegrated in seconds. "Our orbital infrastructure is gone," an officer reported grimly. "We're defenseless." Vincent's mind raced. He'd faced seemingly hopeless odds before, but this was different. These new invaders, the Zarkil, were unlike anything they'd encountered. He called an emergency meeting of Earth's leaders. As they gathered in the war room, fear etched on every face, Vincent laid out his plan. "We can't win this fight conventionally," he said. "Our only hope is to evacuate. We'll use the Vidian colony ships we captured, get our people to the Kepler system." Protests erupted. "Abandon Earth?" someone shouted. Vincent banged his hand on the table. "It's that or extinction. We don't have time to debate." As the others argued, Vincent pulled Marcus aside. "I need you to oversee the evacuation," he said. "Get as many people off-world as you can." Marcus nodded, his face grim. "What about you?" "I'm staying behind with a rear guard. We'll buy you time." Construction began in secret. Massive colony ships took shape in hidden underground facilities. Meanwhile, Vincent led daring raids against the Zarkil forces, striking from the shadows and vanishing before the synthetics could retaliate. Weeks turned to months. The Zarkil pushed deeper into Earth's territory, but the guerrilla campaign slowed their advance. Vincent watched as city after city fell, each loss fueling his persistence. Finally, the day came. Marcus reported that the colony ships were ready. Vincent gave the order to begin loading civilians. As millions of people boarded the massive vessels, Vincent led a desperate holding action. His forces fought block by block, street by street, buying precious time with their blood. The colony ships rose from their hidden hangars, streaking for the stars. Vincent watched them go, a bittersweet smile on his face. Then he turned back to the fight. Using salvaged Vidian tech, Vincent and his team beamed aboard the Zarkil flagship. They fought their way to the reactor core, facing waves of robotic defenders. "This is it," Vincent said, setting the antimatter reactor to overload. "Get to the escape pods." His team hesitated. "What about you, sir?" Vincent shook his head. "Someone has to make sure this goes off. Now go." As his forces evacuated, Vincent sent one last transmission to the fleeing colony ships. "Never surrender," he said. "Humanity will endure." The reactor detonated. A blinding flash engulfed the Zarkil armada. In that instant, the colony ships slipped away, racing for the safety of deep space. Aboard the lead vessel, Marcus received Vincent's final message. Tears streamed down his face as he vowed to keep humanity's flame alive. The colony ships pushed their engines to the limit, barely staying ahead of Zarkil pursuit. After a harrowing journey, they finally reached the twin worlds of Kepler 186f and Kepler 186e. As the evacuees began to build their new homes, Marcus addressed the survivors. "We've lost Earth," he said, "but we haven't lost hope. One day we'll take back our homeworld. For now, we build. We grow stronger. And we never forget those who sacrificed everything so we could live on." Years passed. The human colonies flourished, harnessing Vidian technology to create mighty fleets. As Zarkil scouts probed the edges of their territory, a new generation prepared for war. Caleb Coleman, son of the legendary Vincent, stood on the bridge of humanity's newest flagship. He gazed out at the assembled armada, knowing the real battle was just beginning. "All ships report status," Caleb ordered. Caleb nodded, his father's perseverance burning in his eyes. "Then let's take back what's ours for Earth." The massive fleet surged forward, carrying humanity's last best hope across the stars. The war to reclaim their homeworld had begun. The twin worlds of Kepler 186f and Kepler 186x bustled with feverish activity. Massive orbital shipyards stretched across the sky, their skeletal frames berthing warships at a relentless pace. On the surface, clone troopers marched in perfect unison, their boots pounding the earth in thunderous rhythm. Marcus Ramirez stood on a balcony overlooking a vast training ground, his once dark hair now streaked with grey. He watched as a legion of clones executed complex maneuvers, their movements precise and lethal. Marcus nodded. "They're ready, but are we?" Caleb's face hardened. We have to be, for Earth. Alarms blared across the colony. Caleb sprinted to the command center, holographic displays flickering to life. A swarm of Zarkil scout drones pierced the outer defense grid. All ships execute Protocol Omega, Caleb ordered. The trap sprung. Cloaked Confederation fighters pounced on the unsuspecting scouts, tearing them apart with pinpoint laser fire. Within minutes, the skies were clear. In the aftermath, Caleb addressed the gathered officials. Every victory brings us closer to Earth, but some question our path. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A counselor stood. Admiral, perhaps we should focus on new worlds, not a radioactive husk. Caleb's eyes flashed. Earth is our home. Its freedom was bought with the blood of billions, including my father. We will reclaim it, regardless of the cost. His words ignited a fire in the room. Cheers erupted, drowning out the dissenters. Weeks later, Caleb paced the bridge of his flagship. A junior officer approached, datapad trembling in his hands. Sir, the probes. They found a gap in the Zarkil network. Caleb's heart raced. Sound General Quarters, all ships prepare for jump. The Confederation Armada assembled, a sea of metal stretching beyond the horizon. Caleb gave the order, and 600,000 warships vanished in a blinding flash. For agonizing seconds, they hurtled through the void. Then, with a violent lurch, they emerged. The rings of Saturn loomed before them, and beyond, the red orb of Mars. All ships open fire, Caleb roared. 100,000 antimatter beams lanced out, slamming into Mars's defenses. The planet's shields buckled and shattered. Zarkil ships swarmed from hidden bases, their weapons blazing. As the space battle raged, dropships pierced the Martian atmosphere. Marcus Ramirez, his aged body enhanced with cutting-edge cybernetics, led the charge. Plasma bolts sizzled past as he and his team fought their way into the fractured Zarkil hub. "Begin the hack," Marcus ordered, his fingers flying across a hollow interface. Aboard his flagship, Caleb seized the opportunity. "All ships form up on me. We're going home." The Confederation fleet split, one wing drawing off the confused Zarkil defenders. Caleb's group accelerated towards Earth, plowing through orbital defenses. Caleb Coleman's voice crackled over the comm. "All ships execute Operation Homecoming." The Confederation Armada split. Vice Admiral Maya Singh's contingent surged forward, her flagship's engines flaring as it led the charge against the Zarkil reinforcements. "Initiate jump sequence," Maya ordered. Her fleet vanished in a flash of light, reappearing behind the synthetic juggernauts. Plasma torpedoes erupted from her ships, slamming into the Zarkil's exposed rear flanks. As Maya's forces drew off the enemy, Caleb's main fleet accelerated toward Earth. The planet's orbital defenses lit up, hurling streams of antimatter fire at the approaching armada. "Evasive maneuvers," Caleb shouted. His ships weaved through the barrage, shields buckling under the onslaught. Caleb's vanguard opened fire, their massive cannons bombarding the fortified bastions, guarding Earth's approach vectors. Explosions bloomed across the orbital fortresses as Ravager Marines launched their boarding pods. Inside one of the pods, Sergeant Jax readied his plasma rifle. The pod slammed into the hull of a Zarkil battle station, its breaching charges blowing open an entry point. Jax and his squad poured out, engaging the station's robotic defenders in close-quarters combat. "Push to the reactor core," Jax yelled over the din of battle. His team fought their way through winding corridors, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to outmaneuver the Zarkil security drones. As key battle stations fell silent, their reactors deactivated by the Ravagers, Caleb turned his attention to the ground assault. "Marcus, you're clear for deployment." Marcus Ramirez stood in the troop bay of a massive carrier, surrounded by rows of cybernetically enhanced super soldiers. "Initiating drop sequence," he said, his voice steady despite the years that had passed. The bay doors opened, revealing Earth's war-torn surface below. Marcus and his cyborg commandos leapt into the void, their armored forms streaking toward the planet like meteors. Plasma lances from Confederation ships carved paths through the orbital minefields, clearing the way for waves of dropships. The vessels plunged into Earth's atmosphere, their hulls glowing red-hot as they descended. On the ground, Zar-Kill garrison units scrambled to repel the invasion. Massive Sentinel war machines stomped into position, their weapons primed to obliterate the incoming human forces. Marcus hit the ground with earth-shaking force, his cybernetic legs absorbing the impact. Around him, 500,000 super soldiers landed, immediately engaging the Zar-Kill defenses. "Advance!" Marcus roared, leading a charge against a Zar-Kill stronghold. His cybernetic arm transformed into a plasma cannon, vaporizing synthetic troops with each shot. As Marcus's main force pushed toward London's ruins, Caleb deployed an elite vanguard unit to Los Angeles. The team fought through the city's shattered remains, searching for their objective. "There!" a vanguard soldier shouted, pointing to a half-buried bunker. They breached the ancient facility, finding a console still pulsing with power after centuries of dormancy. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, long-dormant nanoforges rumbled to life. The ground shook as waves of newly created war machines erupted from hidden access points. In orbit, Caleb watched in awe as swarms of hunter-killer drones joined his fleet, bolstering their numbers. On the surface, Marcus's troops found themselves suddenly reinforced by endless waves of combat robots. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Zar-Kill forces, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught of their own repurposed creations, began to falter. In New York's ruins, Marcus led his elite Ravagers in a final push against the local Zar-Kill nexus. They fought through waves of desperate defenders, their cybernetic enhancements allowing them to shrug off wounds that would have felled normal humans. "We're through," Marcus shouted as they breached the nexus core. "Upload the virus." A Ravager tech jammed a data spike into the Zar-Kill systems. The virus raced through the planetary network, seizing control of every nanoforge it touched. Marcus's fingers flew across a hollow interface. "Transmitting override codes now," he said, his voice tight with anticipation. Across Earth, the reprogrammed nanoforges kicked into overdrive. Endless streams of Confederation war machines poured forth, overwhelming the remaining Zar-Kill forces. In orbit, Caleb's platforms unleashed a punishing barrage against the last Zar-Kill strongholds. On the ground, Marcus watched as his mechanized legions assembled, ready to deliver the final blow in humanity's long struggle to reclaim their home. Marcus Ramirez stood at the head of his Ravager battalion, cybernetic implants humming with energy. The repurposed Zar-Kill nanoforges churned behind them, spewing out endless waves of combat drones and weaponry. "This is it," Marcus said, his voice amplified through the neural network connecting his troops. "The final push. Let's take back our home." The Ravagers surged forward, their augmented bodies moving with inhuman speed and precision. Zar-Kill defenders poured from their fortifications, but the endless stream of Confederation reinforcements overwhelmed them. The sky lit up as antimatter beams lanced down from the fleet, vaporizing Zar-Kill strongholds. The ground shook with each impact, clouds of vaporized concrete and steel billowing into the air. On the Mediterranean front, Admiral Maya Singh's diversionary force fought a desperate holding action. Her ship's hulls glowed red-hot from constant energy barrages, armor plates sloughing off in molten streams. "We can't hold much longer," her XO shouted over the din of alarms. Singh's face was grim as she input the final command codes. "It's been an honor," she said, "for Earth." Her flagship's reactor went critical, a miniature sun blooming in the vacuum of space. The shockwave tore through both fleets, leaving only silence in its wake. On Mars, stealth shuttles pierced the thin atmosphere, carrying elite cyborg infiltrators. They fought their way through automated defenses, mirroring the earlier assault on the New York Nexus. "We're in," the team leader reported, "uploading the kill virus now." The Zar-Kill network convulsed as the virus spread, severing connections and frying circuitry. Across Earth, the invaders' coordination crumbled. For weeks, the battle raged without pause. The Zar-Kill, cut off from resupply, grew increasingly desperate. They triggered hidden nukes, ignited fault lines, and unleashed bioweapons. But each time the Confederation's appropriated nanoforges churned out countermeasures. Radiation scrubbers, tectonic stabilizers, and engineered antibodies neutralized every threat. Finally, the last Tsar-kill strongholds in New Delhi and Beijing fell silent. Marcus broadcast his final ultimatum, offering surrender to any remaining synthetics. Marcus nodded to his communications officer. "Do it." The purge protocol activated, frying every Tsar-kill cognitive matrix on the planet. In orbit, Caleb's mirror swarms bathed the surface in gamma radiation, ensuring total eradication. As dawn broke over a liberated Earth, Marcus and Caleb stood in the glassified ruins of London. The sky above was clear, unmarred by the constant battles of the past century. Caleb raised his voice, addressing the gathered troops and civilian observers. "Today we reclaim Earth for humanity. The Confederation of Allied Worlds will make this our new capital, a shining beacon of hope in the galaxy." But Marcus's cybernetic eyes scanned the horizon, his expression troubled. He leaned close to Caleb, speaking softly. "We've won this battle," Marcus said. "But out there, beyond the stars, I fear the real war is just—" Marcus's words hung in the air, heavy with foreboding. Caleb turned to face his old friend, his cybernetic eye whirring as it adjusted focus. "And what do you mean, Marcus?" Caleb asked, his voice low. Before Marcus could respond, a piercing alarm shattered the moment. Red emergency lights bathed the command center in an eerie glow. "Sir," a young officer rushed in, his face pale. "We've detected anomalous energy signatures in the Orion Nebula. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." Years passed. The ruins of Earth slowly gave way to gleaming cities and verdant fields. Cyborg-enhanced terraforming drones swarmed across the continents, their precise manipulations erasing millennia of devastation. In New Beijing, Caleb Coleman stood before a holographic display of Earth, satisfaction evident on his weathered face. "Another sector restored," he said, watching as a red zone turned green. "We're making real progress." His aide nodded but hesitated before speaking. "Sir, there's a situation. General Ramirez is requesting an urgent meeting." Caleb's expression hardened. "Send him in." Marcus Ramirez strode into the room, his cybernetic enhancements humming with barely contained energy. "Caleb, we need to talk about our priorities." "Our priority is rebuilding our home, Marcus, you know that." Marcus smacked his palm on the table, leaving a dent in the reinforced metal. "Our priority should be preparing for the next threat. We need to strip mine Mars, Jupiter's moons, everything we can get our hands on. Build a fleet that will make the Tsar-kill look like toys." Caleb shook his head. "We've been over this. Earth needs time to heal, to—" A young scientist burst into the room, her eyes wide with excitement. "President Coleman, General Ramirez, you need to see this immediately." Dr. Eliana Voigt's hands shook as she activated a holographic display. Images of strange otherworldly artifacts filled the air. "We found these beneath the ruins of Rio de Janeiro," Voight explained. They're not human in origin, and they're far more advanced than anything we've ever seen." Marcus's eyes gleamed. "Weapons?" "Uncertain," Voight replied, "but the potential is staggering." Caleb studied the artifacts, his expression grave. "This could change everything we thought we knew about our history. Dr. Voight, I want you to lead an expedition. We need to know more." Marcus bristled. "Caleb, we can't waste time on archaeology. These could be the key to—" "Enough!" Caleb's voice cracked like a whip. "The expedition goes forward, that's final." As Marcus stormed out, Caleb didn't notice the subtle nod the general gave to a group of officers in the corner. Weeks later, alarms blared across the New Beijing command center. A breathless technician reported, "Sir, long-range probes have detected something in the Orion Nebula. It's vast, it's artificial, and it's consuming everything in its path." The room fell silent as images appeared on the main screen. A roiling mass of metal and energy pulsed at the heart of the nebula, tendrils of destructive force reaching out to nearby systems. Dr. Voigt's face appeared, streaked with blood and terror. "They're here, some kind of drones. They're killing everyone. We need—" The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Chaos erupted in the command center. Amid the shouting, Marcus's voice rose above the din. "This is what I warned you about, Caleb. We need to strike now, before it's too late." Caleb's fingers flew across his console, initiating emergency protocols. "We need to fortify our defenses, show them we're not to be trifled with. If we strike first, we'll be no better than—" The lights flickered, then died. When they came back on, armed soldiers filled the room, their weapons trained on Caleb. As Caleb was led away in restraints, Marcus turned to his assembled officers. "Prepare the fleet. We strike at the heart of the Verina hive. And someone find me Damien Cross. I have a job for him." In the depths of the Rio ruins, Eliana Voigt huddled in darkness, the sounds of inhuman pursuers echoing through ancient tunnels. She clutched a small, pulsing artifact to her chest, praying it held the key to humanity's survival. Eliana Voigt clutched the pulsing artifact to her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she sprinted through the crumbling tunnels beneath Rio. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit echoed off ancient stone walls. "This way!" Dr. Jameson Riley shouted, waving frantically. "We need to split up." Voigt nodded, her mind racing. "Take half the team to the Amazon. I'll lead the rest deeper into the ruins." As Riley's group peeled off, Voigt activated her comlink. "Caleb, we need an exit strategy, fast." Static crackled. Then Caleb Coleman's voice came through, strained but determined. "Working on it. Hold tight." In New Beijing, Caleb's fingers flew across a holographic interface. The quantum inhibitor nodes in his cell flickered, then died. Energy surged through his body as his long-suppressed abilities awakened. With a thought, Caleb phased through the cell wall. Two guards turned, eyes wide with shock. Before they could react, Caleb unleashed a psionic blast that sent them crumpling to the floor. He sprinted down the corridor, accessing a secure terminal. "Eliana, I've got a lock on your position. There's a precursor access portal 50 meters ahead. I'm transmitting activation codes now." In the Amazon, Riley's team huddled beneath the dense canopy. Their phasing cloaks shimmered, barely visible in the dappled sunlight. A tribesman gestured urgently, leading them deeper into the jungle. The ground trembled. Riley looked up, his face pale. "Drop hammers! Everyone move!" They ran as the forest behind them erupted in plasma fire. Trees vaporized, leaving glowing craters in their wake. Riley's mind raced, piecing together fragments of tribal lore and precursor mythology. "The river," he muttered. "It's not just water, it's a map." Back in Rio, Voigt's team reached the access portal. Ancient machinery hummed to life as she input Caleb's codes. The walls shimmered, revealing a vast chamber beyond. "Incredible," Voigt breathed, taking in the alien architecture. "Quick, activate those defenses." Her scientists scrambled to interface with unfamiliar controls. Energy fields sprang up, sealing off corridors as Cross's Ravagers pounded at the outer doors. Voigt approached a central console, her hands trembling as she accessed the precursor archives. Images flooded her mind, glimpses of a civilization so advanced it had transcended physical reality itself. "My God," she whispered, "they found a way to—" The chamber shook. A massive figure phased through the energy barriers, fusion lances glowing ominously. Captain Scourge, his nano-composite armor rippling with barely contained power. "End of the line, Doctor," Scourge growled, raising his weapons. A blinding rift tore open in the air. Caleb Coleman stepped through, cosmic energies crackling around him. "I wouldn't be so sure about that." Caleb unleashed a torrent of psionic force. Scourge staggered back, his armor buckling under the assault. The two titans clashed in a fury of energy and nanites. Voigt seized her chance. She grabbed a strange, multifaceted object from a nearby pedestal, the Dimensialith. It pulsed with otherworldly power in her hands. Reality itself seemed to tear. A swirling vortex of impossible geometries opened before them. Without hesitation, Voigt plunged through, her team following close behind. The portal snapped shut, leaving Caleb alone with the stunned Ravagers. He vanished in another rift, reappearing in Cross's command center. "You're too late," Caleb said, a hint of smugness in his voice. "They're beyond your reach now." Cross snarled in frustration, hitting his fist on a console. "This isn't over. I'll find a way to follow them no matter what it takes." Light years away, Marcus Ramirez crouched behind a makeshift barricade on Orion Prime. The sky above writhed with Vrina bioships, raining destruction on the Confederation's faltering lines. His calm crackled, Caleb's voice tense but triumphant. "Marcus, we've found something, a weapon that could turn the tide, but we need time." Marcus nodded grimly, signaling his troops to hold position. "Whatever it takes, old friend, we'll buy you that time." He raised his voice, rallying his battered forces. "Confederation, stand fast. Reinforcements are coming." As plasma fire rained down, Marcus steeled himself for the long siege ahead, hoping against hope that Caleb's discovery would come in time to save them all. The Dementiolith pulsed in Eliana Voight's hands, its facets glowing with otherworldly energy. In a flash of blinding light, she and her team found themselves transported from the crumbling ruins of Rio to a vast underground chamber on an alien world. Voight blinked, her eyes adjusting to the dim blue light emanating from towering crystal columns. "Everyone okay?" she called out, scanning her surroundings. Dr. Jameson Riley stumbled to his feet, steadying himself against a nearby console. "I think so. Where are we?" Before Voight could answer, the chamber hummed to life. Dormant systems awakened, sending cascades of light racing through previously dark conduits. Massive liquid crystal displays flickered on, flooding the air with streams of alien data. "My God," Voight breathed, her eyes wide. "It's a precursor facility. We need to start analyzing this data immediately." Her team sprang into action, connecting data pads and setting up portable uplinks. Fingers flew across holographic interfaces as they raced to capture and decode the wealth of information surrounding them. A crackling sound filled the air. Voight spun around to see a shimmering portal materialize. Caleb Coleman stepped through, his clothing singed and face streaked with sweat. "Eliana," he said, his voice tight. "We don't have much time. Cross has developed chrono-splinter tech. He's coming." Voight opened her mouth to respond, but a deafening boom cut her off. The far wall of the chamber exploded inward, showering them with debris. Through the dust and smoke, heavily armored figures emerged, their warp displacement harnesses crackling with energy. "Ravagers!" Riley shouted, diving for cover. The air filled with the whine of energy weapons powering up. Voight barely had time to duck behind a console before Metrobusters and mag warheads rained down, their impacts shaking the entire facility. "Keep working!" Voight shouted to her team over the din of battle. "We need that data." Caleb stepped forward, his hands glowing with psionic energy. He threw up a shimmering barrier just as a volley of thermobaric rounds screamed towards them. The explosions buffeted the shield, but it held. With a grunt of effort, Caleb pushed back. Lances of focused ion energy shot from his fingertips, cutting through the Ravager ranks. Where they struck, armor melted, and circuitry fried. The fight raged on, neither side giving ground. Voight split her attention between the battle and her team's frantic efforts to extract data from the precursor systems. A new figure emerged from the portal, Damian Cross himself, encased in a monstrous suit of experimental armor. He strode forward, the ground shaking with each step. Caleb turned to face his nemesis, energy crackling around his fists. "I'm not hiding, Cross. Let's finish this." The two titans clashed in a fury of energy and nanites. Cross's armor unleashed waves of distortion that warped the very air. Caleb staggered, his psionic abilities fluctuating wildly. Voight tore her eyes away from the titanic struggle, focusing on Dr. Francis Porter, who was furiously typing at a nearby terminal. "I've got something," Porter shouted. "It's a map, coordinates to other precursor sites." Voight's heart leapt. This could be the key to everything. A deafening explosion rocked the chamber. One of the power cells had overloaded, unleashing a devastating shockwave. Ravager troops were vaporized instantly. The very walls of the facility began to buckle and twist. As they ran, Voight glanced back. Caleb and Cross were still locked in combat, oblivious to the destruction around them. With a final titanic effort, Caleb unleashed all his power in a single, focused attack. The resulting implosion tore a hole in reality itself. Both Caleb and Cross vanished in a flash of impossible light. Voight's shuttle tore free of the disintegrating facility, just as it collapsed in on itself, leaving nothing but empty space behind. "We've lost Caleb," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But we can't let his sacrifice be in vain. We have a map to the stars, to technologies that could save us all. It's time to regroup with what's left of our fleet and continue the fight." Eliana Voight's heart pounded as she stepped onto the bridge of the Indomitable. The massive Dreadnought's command center bustled with frantic activity, hollow displays flickering with streams of tactical data. Admiral Thelonious Blake stood at the central console, his weathered face etched with lines of exhaustion. He looked up as Voight approached, nodding grimly. "Dr. Voight, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." Voight cut straight to the chase. "What's the situation, Admiral?" Blake's fingers danced across the hollow controls, bringing up a three-dimensional star map. Red markers swarmed across it like a plague of locusts. "Ramirez's forces have been routed in the Orion Nebula," Blake said, his voice tight. "The Vrina submatrix legions are adapting faster than we can counter. Our fortress worlds are falling one by one." Voight's stomach lurched as she took in the sheer scale of the Vrina advance. And Earth. Blake's expression darkened further. He tapped a command, zooming the display to focus on their home system. A massive cluster of hostile markers approached relentlessly. "Long-range scans have detected an armada unlike anything we've ever seen," Blake said. "Over 1 million capital ships, with swarms of escorts and weapons platforms. They're on a direct course for Earth." Voight's mind reeled at the implications. She steadied herself against a nearby console, her fingers brushing the datapad containing the precious precursor information. "Admiral," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I have something that might change everything." She connected the datapad to the main display. Ancient star charts flickered to life, overlaying the modern tactical map. "These are galactic coordinates for Nexus worlds," Voight explained. "Sites where the precursors left caches of their most advanced technology. If we can reach them before the Vrina—" Blake's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. It could turn the tide of the war. A proximity alarm blared. On the main view screen, a battered flotilla of ships tore out of hyperspace. Their hulls were scorched and pitted, armor plates hanging loose. "Ramirez," Blake muttered. Minutes later, Marcus Ramirez stormed onto the bridge. His cybernetic augmentations sparked and sputtered, damage evident across his hulking frame. Without preamble, he smacked his fist on the central hollow table. "We need to strike back now," Ramirez roared. "Hit them with everything we have left before they reach the inner colonies." Blake shook his head. "Marcus, be reasonable. Look at the numbers. We'd be annihilated." Ramirez's augmented hand shot out, grabbing Blake by the throat. "You coward. You'd have us run and hide while humanity burns?" Voight stepped forward, bringing up the Vrina Armada data on the main display. The sheer magnitude of the hostile force filled the screen. Ramirez's grip loosened as the reality of their situation sank in. His shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. "Then what do we do?" he asked, his voice hollow. Blake massaged his throat, coughing. "We fall back to Kepler 186F. It's our last stronghold with the resources to mount a real defense." Voight spoke up. "And I'll take a small team to track down the precursor sites. It's our only shot at finding a weapon that can stop this." Ramirez's cybernetic eye whirred as he processed the plan. Finally, he gave a curt nod. As Blake transmitted the fallback order to all remaining Confederation assets, Voight made her way to the hangar bay. A trio of sleek science vessels waited, their experimental hyperwarp drives humming with potential energy. Voight paused at the foot of the boarding ramp, looking back at the organized chaos of the Indomitable's hangar. Thousands of crew members worked frantically to prepare for the coming battle, knowing full well it might be their last. She squared her shoulders and strode up the ramp. As her small flotilla disengaged from the Indomitable, Voight watched through the view screen as humanity's last armada formed up in dense battle formations. The vast starfield before them shimmered as the hyperwarp drives engaged. In a flash of reality-warping energy, Voight's ships vanished into the depths of space, carrying with them the fragile hope of humanity's survival. The hyperwarp drives of Eliana Voight's science vessels thrummed with energy as they tore free from Kepler 186F's gravity well. Through the viewports, Voight watched the last human stronghold shrink to a pinprick of light against the vast canvas of space. "All systems nominal," reported Dr. Jameson Riley from his station. "Coordinates locked for the first precursor site." "We're clear of the system," announced the pilot. "Engaging hyperwarp in 3, 2, 1... Reality twisted around them as the drives activated. Stars blurred into streaks of light, and Voight felt a familiar lurch in her stomach. Back at Kepler 186F, Admiral Thelonious Blake stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Unyielding. Holo displays surrounded him, each one depicting a different aspect of the unfolding battle. "Sir, Vrina Vanguard entering extreme weapons range," reported his tactical officer. Across the Confederation fleet, ships began to move. Massive dreadnoughts formed the core of dense geometric formations, while swarms of fighters and drones took up screening positions. The void between the opposing armadas lit up as the first salvos were exchanged. Lances of coherent energy crossed paths with swarms of bio-missiles. Space itself seemed to warp and buckle under the onslaught. On the surface of Kepler 186F's largest moon, technicians scrambled to bring the mass drivers online. Massive electromagnetic coils crackled with power as they accelerated projectiles to relativistic speeds. "Mass drivers charged and ready," came the report over the comms. Blake gave a curt nod. "Fire at will." The moon's surface erupted with blinding flashes as the mass drivers unleashed their fury. Streams of hypervelocity projectiles tore through space, punching through Vrina ships effortlessly. But still they came. In the thick of the fighting, Marcus Ramirez led his Ravagers on a suicidal charge. His Annihilation Nexus battlesuit glowed with barely contained energy as he plunged into the heart of the Vrina formation. "For Earth!" Ramirez roared, his voice carried across all Confederation frequencies. "For humanity!" His antimatter lance lashed out, bisecting a Vrina capital ship. The wounded vessel's biomechanical hull writhed in agony before detonating in a miniature supernova. All around him, Ravagers engaged in brutal close-quarters combat. Fusion beams clashed with alien energy weapons. Swarms of nanites battled ever-evolving biodrones. For hours the battle raged. Kepler 186F's orbit became a graveyard of twisted metal and alien biomass, but the Vrina kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Ramirez's suit sparked and sputtered, damage indicators flashing red across his HUD. He knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. "Blake," he growled into the calm, "tell me you have an exit strategy." On the Unyielding, Blake's face was grim. "Negative, we're cut off from the warp gate. It's now or never, Marcus." Ramirez laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Then let's make it count." He reached for the override controls of his suit's singularity core. Warnings blared, but he silenced them with practiced ease. "All units," Ramirez broadcast. "Fall back to the warp gate. I'll buy you the time you need." Before anyone could object, Ramirez plunged deeper into the Vrina formation. His fingers danced across holographic controls, initiating the suit's self-destruct sequence. As the singularity core began to overload, Ramirez closed his eyes. He thought of Earth, of the billions they'd already lost, of the hope carried by Voight's mission. "We fall as soldiers, as warriors," he transmitted, "but we will not be forgotten." The universe seemed to hold its breath for a moment. Then Ramirez's suit detonated. A miniature black hole blossomed in the heart of the Varina Armada. Ships were torn apart by tidal forces. Exotic particles scoured away entire squadrons. For a precious few moments, the Varina advance faltered. Blake seized the opportunity. "All ships make for the warp gate, now!" The remnants of the Confederation fleet disengaged, racing for the shimmering portal that would carry them to safety. Varina pursuers were caught in the expanding wave of gravitational distortions, buying the humans precious seconds. As the last Confederation ship passed through, Blake gave the order to collapse the gate. The wormhole twisted in on itself, severing the link between star systems. In the sudden silence that followed, Blake stared at the empty space where the gate had been. They'd survived, but at a terrible cost, and somewhere out there, Eliana Voigt carried the last hope for humanity's survival. The Indomitable shuddered as it tore through the fabric of space-time. On the bridge, Admiral Blake gripped the command rail, his squeezing hard as the ship bucked and heaved. Emergency klaxons blared, and warning lights bathed the crew in an eerie red glow. "Structural integrity at 62% and falling," shouted the chief engineer over the comms. "We can't take much more of this, sir." Blake's eyes never left the main view screen, which showed nothing but a swirling maelstrom of distorted light. "Hold her together, Chief. We're almost through." With a final violent lurch, the Indomitable burst from the collapsing warp gate. Blake stumbled, catching himself on a nearby console. As his vision cleared, he took in the unfamiliar starfield before them. "Status report," he barked. Lieutenant Heston's fingers danced across his controls. "Sir, astrometrics confirm we've emerged in the Yakima void. No sign of Varina pursuit." "Still coming through, sir," Heston replied. "I count 37 vessels so far. Make that 38. One by one, the battered remnants of humanity's last armada limped through the gate. Some trailed debris, others sparked with damage from their desperate flight. As the final ship emerged, the warp gate collapsed with a silent flash. "That's it, sir," Heston reported. 43 ships accounted for. The gate is gone." Blake's shoulders sagged. 43 ships. Out of hundreds. He pushed the thought aside and turned to his XO. "Assemble the senior staff in the war room. We need to assess our situation." Minutes later, Blake stood before a holographic display of their fleet. The gathered officers looked haggard, their uniforms stained and torn. The fleet logistics officer stepped forward. "Sir, our hyperwarp reserves are critically low. Most ships are reporting less than 10% capacity. We won't be making any long jumps anytime soon." The medical chief's voice was hollow as she answered. "Preliminary reports indicate we've lost over 80% of our combat forces. Those who survived are in rough shape. Our medical bays are overwhelmed." A heavy silence fell over the room. Blake let it linger for a moment before speaking. "We all knew the costs when we signed up for this fight. Now we honor their sacrifice by staying alive." He turned to Heston. "Lieutenant, I need you to plot us a series of short jumps. Random vectors, nothing predictable. We need to stay off the Varina's sensors while we regroup." "Dr. Voigt," Blake continued, "your team's work is more critical than ever. We need to find that precursor site." Eliana Voigt stepped forward, her eyes blazing with persistence. "We won't let you down, Admiral. My team is already combing through the data we recovered. We'll find it." Blake surveyed the room, meeting each officer's gaze in turn. "I won't lie to you. Our situation is dire, but we're still here, still fighting. And as long as we draw breath, there's hope for humanity." Dismissed. As the officers filed out, Blake turned back to the holo display. He studied the pitiful collection of icons representing their fleet, each one carrying a fraction of what remained of the human race. With a heavy sigh, he began planning their next move. Over the next 3 months, the fleet limped through space, making short, erratic jumps to evade detection. Repair crews worked around the clock, patching hulls and cobbling together replacement parts from salvaged wreckage. In the labs aboard the Indomitable, Voigt and her team pored over the precursor data, searching for any clue that might lead them to salvation. It was during one of their routine jumps that Heston made the discovery. As the fleet dropped out of warp, his console lit up with unusual readings. "Admiral," Heston called out, "you need to see this." Blake strode over, leaning in to study the readouts. "What am I looking at, Lieutenant?" Heston's fingers flew across the controls, bringing up a magnified view of the nearby binary star system. "These gravimetric anomalies, sir. They're off the charts. I've never seen anything like it." Blake's brow furrowed. "Could it be a Vrina trap?" "I don't think so, sir," Heston replied. "The energy signature doesn't match any known Vrina technology. It's something else entirely." Blake straightened, his mind racing. "Get me Dr. Voight, now." Within minutes, Voight arrived on the bridge, her eyes wide with excitement as she examined Heston's findings. "This is it, Admiral," she breathed. "This has to be connected to the precursors. We need to investigate immediately." Blake nodded, his decision made. "Launch the scout probes. Let's see what we're dealing with." As the probe streaked towards the anomaly, the bridge crew waited in tense silence. When the first images came through, a collective gasp went up. There, suspended in the stellar corona, hung a shimmering fragment of what could only be described as a tear in the fabric of space itself. Voight's hands trembled as she manipulated the hollow controls, enhancing the image. "It's a remnant of an Einstein-Rosen bridge," she announced, her voice filled with awe. "The same technology the precursors used to seed their artifacts across the galaxy. Admiral, this could be the key we've been looking for." Blake studied the strange phenomenon, a glimmer of hope kindling in his chest. "What do you need, Doctor?" Voight's eyes never left the display as she answered. "The Indomitable's Ryan beam. If we can use it to probe the rift's accretion field, we might be able to extract the coordinate data for the nearest precursor nexus." "And the risks?" Blake asked, already knowing the answer. Voight met his gaze, her expression grave. "Catastrophic, sir. If we miscalculate, we could trigger a singularity that would consume this entire system, but it's our only shot." Blake closed his eyes, weighing the decision. After a long moment, he nodded. "Do it. But be careful, Doctor. We're putting a lot of faith in you." "Understood, sir," Voight replied. She turned to her team, already rattling off a series of complex instructions. As the Indomitable's massive Ryan projectors hummed to life, Blake watched from the command chair, his hands clenched tight. The fate of humanity now rested on the shoulders of one woman and her high-stakes endeavor. A brilliant beam of energy lanced out from the Indomitable, striking the rift fragment dead center. The bridge view screen automatically polarized to protect the crew from the blinding light. Voight's fingers danced across her console, making minute adjustments to the beam's frequency. "Increase power output to maximum," she ordered. "We need to push it further." The ship groaned under the strain as every scrap of available energy was diverted to the Ryan projectors. Warning lights flashed across every console, but Voight paid them no heed, her focus absolute. Suddenly the rift fragment flared with impossible brightness. A shockwave of gravitic energy slammed into the fleet, tossing ships about like leaves in a storm. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, someone shouted. "Compensating!" Voight yelled back, her fingers a blur of motion. Just as it seemed the ships would be torn apart, a crystalline lattice of light burst forth from the dying rift. It hung there for a fraction of a second, a ghostly roadmap of quantum pathways. As quickly as it appeared, the lattice collapsed, leaving behind nothing but empty space and a rapidly dissipating cloud of exotic particles. In the stunned silence that followed, Voight turned to face the bridge crew, her face streaked with sweat but her eyes shining. "We did it," she announced. "We have the coordinates to the first precursor nexus." A ragged cheer went up from the exhausted crew. Blake allowed himself a small smile before turning to Heston. "Plot the course, Lieutenant. It's time we took the fight to the enemy." As Heston began transmitting the jump coordinates to the rest of the fleet, Voight stepped up to the ship-wide comm. Her voice rang out across every vessel in the battered armada. "This is Dr. Eliana Voight," she began, her words carrying the weight of humanity's hopes. "Today, We honor those we've lost. Today, we take the first step towards reclaiming our future. The path before us is long and fraught with danger, but at its end lies the key to our survival. Together, we will unlock the secrets of the precursors. Together, we will save our species. As Voight's speech concluded, Blake gave the order. One by one, the last warships of humanity activated their hyperwarp drives. In a cascading wave of distorted space-time, they vanished from the Yakima void, bound for the unknown and the desperate hope it promised. The Indomitable shuddered as it tore through the fabric of space-time, emerging into the Theta Corvi star cluster with a flash of Cherenkov radiation. On the bridge, Admiral Blake steadied himself against his command chair. "Status report," he barked. Lieutenant Heston's fingers flew across his console. "Sir, we've arrived at the coordinates extracted from the Einstein-Rosen bridge fragment. All ships accounted for." Blake nodded, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. "What are we looking at, Lieutenant?" The view screen flickered to life, revealing a massive structure orbiting a brilliant blue hypergiant star. The construct dwarfed their fleet, its surface a maze of geometric patterns that hurt the eyes to look at directly. "Energy readings are off the charts," Heston reported, "but they're unlike anything in our database. Sir, I think we've found it, a precursor nexus site." Blake's pulse quickened. "Alert Dr. Voight. We need to move fast before the Vrina catch our scent." Within minutes, Eliana Voight stood on the bridge, her eyes wide as she studied the alien megastructure. "We need to get down there," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "Assemble a team. I want our best people on this." As Voight prepped her away team, heavily armed recon squads boarded a fleet of armored dropships. Blake watched from the bridge as the small craft streaked towards the Nexus, growing smaller against the vast alien construct. On the surface, Sergeant Kira Chen stepped out of her dropship, her pulse rifle at the ready. The artificial planetoid stretched out before her, a landscape of towering spires and twisting fractals that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "Stay alert, people," Chen barked to her squad. "We don't know what kind of defenses this place might have." They hadn't taken more than a dozen steps when the air in front of them shimmered. Chen raised her fist, halting the squad. "Energy barrier," she called out. "Cortez, deploy the disruptor lance." Corporal Cortez hefted a massive device onto his shoulder, aiming it at the invisible barrier. With a high-pitched whine, the lance fired a concentrated beam of energy. The air in front of them warped and twisted, finally tearing open with a sound like shattering glass. "Move, move!" Chen shouted, leading her team through the breach. Inside, they found themselves in a labyrinth of corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, pulsing with an eerie light. After hours of tense exploration, they emerged into a vast chamber. Liquid crystal monoliths flickered to life around them, bathing the room in an otherworldly glow. At the center, hovering above a pedestal, was an octahedral object that seemed to bend the light around it. Voight pushed forward, her eyes locked on the artifact. "It's a dimensiolith," she breathed, "one of the precursor's dimensional gateways." She approached the pedestal, her hands moving across hidden controls with uncanny precision. The dimensiolith began to spin, faster and faster, until it erupted in a blaze of light. A shimmering portal sprang into existence, and through it stepped a being of pure energy. The entity coalesced into a vaguely humanoid form, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "I am the Ascendant Observer," it intoned. "You seek the power to save your kind." Voight stepped forward. "Yes, we need the coordinates to the convergence nexus." The observer's form flickered. "Such knowledge comes at a price. One of you must undergo the hyper-evolutionary synthesis. Only then will you be capable of wielding the power you seek." The dimensiolith flared with blinding intensity. Voight screamed as energy coursed through her body, rewriting her very DNA. When the light faded, she stood transformed, her eyes glowing with newfound power. "The coordinates," she gasped. I can see them. Jen tapped her comm unit. Indomitable, this is ground team. We need immediate evac. Dr. Voight has the intel. As they raced back to the dropships, Voight's team set demolition charges throughout the Nexus. They lifted off just as the first explosions rocked the ancient structure, masking their departure in a storm of fire and debris. Back aboard the Indomitable, Voight transmitted the coordinates to Heston. Her voice, now layered with harmonic overtones, rang out over the ship's comm system. All ships prepare for emergency jump. We have the location of the Convergence Nexus. It's time to take the fight to the enemy. The Indomitable shuddered as it emerged from hyperwarp, the vast emptiness of space replaced by a sprawling graveyard of twisted metal and shattered hulls. Admiral Blake gripped the arms of his command chair, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. "Status report," he barked. Lieutenant Heston's fingers danced across his console. "Sir, we've arrived at the coordinates provided by Dr. Voight. Scanners are picking up faint energy signatures consistent with an artificial megastructure." Blake leaned forward, studying the debris field that stretched as far as the eye could see. Massive chunks of alien vessels drifted silently, their once formidable weapons now cold and lifeless. "What in God's name happened here?" Blake muttered. Heston's voice cut through the silence. "Sir, Astrometrics confirms our location as the Rykill Expanse. It appears we've stumbled upon the aftermath of a colossal battle." The view screen shifted, zooming in on the wreckage. Biohybrid juggernauts, their organic components long since decayed, floated alongside the skeletal remains of cyborg behemoths. Deep scorch marks and gaping holes testified to the devastating power of Hellbore cannons and singularity weapons. Suddenly alarms blared throughout the bridge. Red warning lights bathed the crew in an eerie glow. "Proximity alert," Heston shouted. "Active energy spike detected deep within the graveyard." Blake's mind raced. "Stealth protocols now. Cloak all emissions and raise deflector arrays." The crew worked feverishly, their hands flying over controls as they implemented the Admiral's orders. The Indomitable's lights dimmed, and a low hum filled the air as the deflectors came online. "Dr. Voight," Blake called out, "what are we dealing with?" Eliana Voight stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light, a stark reminder of her recent transformation. She studied the readouts, her brow furrowed in concentration. It's a hyperspatial rift," she said, her voice tinged with awe and fear. "The result of multiple stellar bodies being completely annihilated. This must be the aftermath of a battle between the Vrina and the Precursors." Blake watched as Voight manipulated the holo controls, bringing up a three-dimensional map of the anomaly. Swirling eddies of quantum energy twisted and pulsed around a central point of blinding light. "The rift is unstable," Voight continued. "It's growing, defying everything we know about physics. If we don't act quickly, it could trigger a galactic-scale implosion." Voight's eyes flicked between the Admiral and the holodisplay. "We need to get closer. The rift's energies could lead us to the Convergence Nexus, but we'll have to navigate through that debris field without alerting the Vrina." Blake nodded, his decision made. "Prep the stealth prowlers. We'll use the wreckage as cover." Within minutes, Voight and her team were strapped into individual reconnaissance pods, each equipped with compacted molecular drives and remote-piloted drones. Blake's voice crackled over the comm system. "Remember, absolute stealth is crucial. Map those hyperspatial matrices and get out. Good luck." At Blake's signal, the prowlers disengaged from the Indomitable. Voight felt a momentary surge of acceleration as her pod used the gravitational pull of nearby debris to slingshot deeper into the field. She navigated carefully, her hands steady on the controls as she wove between jagged pieces of alien metal. Time seemed to stretch and warp around her, a side effect of the rift's influence. As Voight's prowler drifted closer to the anomaly's event horizon, her instruments began to falter. Static crackled across her view screens, and her drone's feeds became increasingly distorted. "Come on," she muttered, her fingers flying across the controls as she activated the noise-filtering AI. Slowly, patterns began to emerge from the chaos, 5-dimensional coordinates taking shape in the precursor's complex geometric language. Voight's heart raced. They were so close to unlocking the location of the convergence nexus. Just a few more seconds of data and... The proximity alarm screamed to life. Voight's blood ran cold as her tactical display lit up with dozens of hostile signatures. Vrina biomachines, closing fast. "No, no, no," she whispered, her fingers flying across the controls as she initiated an emergency uplink to the Indomitable. The coordinates had to get through no matter what. The data burst cleared her arrays, just as a violent impact rocked the Prowler. Voight's eyes widened in horror as she saw the grotesque form of a Verina mimic drone tearing through her hull, its razor-sharp appendages slicing through armor plating like paper. The shriek of metal filled her ears as the mimic breached the cockpit. Voight's hand flew to her sidearm, but she knew it was too late. As the alien machine loomed over her, its sensors focusing on her transformed body, Voight closed her eyes and prayed that her sacrifice would be enough to save humanity. Voight's eyes snapped open as her Prowler smashed onto the Indomitable's hangar deck. The impact rattled her bones, and she tasted blood in her mouth. Acrid smoke filled the cockpit as she fumbled with her harness, her fingers clumsy from the adrenaline surge. "Dr. Voight, can you hear me?" a muffled voice called from outside. She kicked at the warped hatch, forcing it open with a screech of tortured metal. Hands reached in, pulling her from the wreckage. Voight stumbled onto the deck, coughing and blinking against the harsh light. Chief Engineer Ramos steadied her. "We've recovered all Prowlers, but the Vrina are right on our tail." The deck shuddered beneath their feet as the Indomitable took evasive action. Voight pushed past Ramos, her legs unsteady as she made for the nearest lift. "Bridge," she commanded, leaning against the wall as the lift shot upwards. On the bridge, Admiral Blake stood rigid, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The space around them swarmed with Verina vessels, their biomechanical forms twisting in ways that defied human understanding. "Admiral," Voight called as she stumbled onto the bridge, "the coordinates—" "Received," Blake cut her off, his voice tense. "Heston, status on the Blackbird Vale?" Lieutenant Heston's fingers danced across his console. "Deploying now, sir." The main view screen flickered, showing the space around the Indomitable shimmer and distort. The Blackbird Vale unfurled like a net of darkness, enveloping the human fleet in its protective embrace. Blake's voice cut through the tension. "All ships execute microjump sequence Alpha. Weapons free, full saturation barrage." The Indomitable lurched as it jumped, reappearing kilometers away in the blink of an eye. Through gaps in the veil, lances of energy erupted from the human ships, tearing into the Vrina formations. Voight gripped a nearby console, her enhanced senses overwhelmed by the battle's intensity. She watched as Blake's fingers hovered over a red button on his command chair. "Detonating antimatter charges," he announced grimly. The view screen flared white as the debris field erupted in a storm of annihilation. Shockwaves rippled through space-time itself, shredding Verina vessels caught in the blast. As the light faded, Voight saw more enemy ships pouring through the ruptured space-time corridors. Blake's face hardened as he assessed the situation. "Plot a course to the convergence coordinates," he ordered. "All ships prepare for trans-warp jump." The bridge hummed as the Indomitable's warp drive spooled up. Voight felt a tugging sensation in her gut as space-time twisted around them. "Jump in 3, 2, 1, Heston called out. Reality stretched and snapped. The familiar stars vanished, replaced by the unknown expanse of an uncharted galactic arm. As the fleet reoriented itself, Voight's enhanced vision picked out a faint, pulsing energy signature in the distance. "There," she breathed, pointing at the view screen, "the convergence nexus." Blake nodded, his eyes fixed on their destination. "Take us in, helm, slow and steady." The Indomitable moved forward, leading the battered human armada towards their last desperate hope. The Indomitable shuddered as it tore through the fabric of space-time, emerging into a star system unlike any Admiral Blake had ever seen. A massive blue hypergiant dominated the view screen, its intense radiation bathing the bridge in an eerie azure glow. Lieutenant Heston's voice cut through the stunned silence. "Sir, long-range scans detecting an artificial structure in orbit around the star." The main holo-display flickered to life, revealing a colossal construct that defied human comprehension. Fractal patterns spiraled outward in impossible geometries, its surface a maze of interlocking shapes that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. Blake leaned forward, studying the tactical readouts. "Precursor architecture," he muttered. "Has to be." Before he could issue orders, Heston's console erupted in a cacophony of alarms. "Admiral! Detecting massive warp signatures on approach vector. It's the V Reiner." "Minutes, sir. They've locked onto our exit vector." The Admiral's mind raced, weighing options that dwindled with each passing second. "Launch recon teams now. We need to find an entry point on that construct before—" His words were cut short as the hangar bays disgorged a swarm of heavily armed dropships. On the tactical display, Blake watched the tiny craft streak towards the alien megastructure. Inside the lead dropship, Jacob Markel gripped the overhead rails as the craft bucked and weaved. "Cut the chatter," he barked at his nervous crew. "We've got one shot at this. Weapons hot." The dropship slammed into an invisible barrier, energy crackling across their hulls. Markel felt his teeth rattle as singularity lances punched holes through layers of ancient defenses. "Push through," he ordered, watching as hafnium micro-warheads detonated in blinding flashes, carving a path through exotic force fields. With a final bone-jarring impact, Markel's dropship touched down on the megastructure's surface. He was first out the hatch, plasma rifle at the ready. As his forces split up, Markel led the way towards a towering aperture that yawned open before them. No sooner had they stepped inside than the air filled with an angry buzzing. "Contact!" someone yelled as swarms of insectoid machines descended upon them. Markel dove for cover as gravitic lances sliced through the air where he'd been standing. "Return fire," he ordered, unleashing a barrage from his rifle. The corridor became a maelstrom of plasma bolts and neutron warheads. Markel watched in grim satisfaction as a singularity mortar detonated, consuming a cluster of the alien drones in a miniature black hole. For what felt like hours, they fought their way deeper into the construct. Reality itself seemed to twist and warp around them, corridors shifting in impossible ways. Finally, Gunnery Sergeant Kemper's voice crackled over the comm. "Sir, I think we've found something." Markel pushed forward, emerging into a vast chamber that hummed with dormant energy. Alien machinery lined the walls, pulsing with an inner light. As Kemper's team secured the perimeter, Markel approached what appeared to be a central control interface. His gauntleted hand hovered over the alien tech, recognizing patterns that matched Voight's transformation. "We need the doctor," he muttered. "She's the only one who can—" Alarms blared, cutting him off. Kemper's voice rang out, tight with tension. "Vrainer, they've breached the outer defenses." Markel's mind raced. They were out of time. "Hold this position," he ordered Kemper. "I'm calling in Voight. Whatever happens, we can't lose this chamber." As plasma beams began to slice through the entryway, Markel established an uplink to the Indomitable. He dodged writhing tendrils of alien alloy, narrowly avoiding decapitation as he transmitted the urgent request for Voight's presence. Back on the flagship, Admiral Blake received Markel's transmission. Without hesitation, he turned to his crew. "Prep the anti-singularity lances. We're sending in Voight." Moments later, space itself tore open on the Indomitable's hull. Through the swirling vortex of the Alcubierre wormhole stepped Ileana Voight, her eyes glowing with otherworldly power. In the alien chamber, Voight strode purposefully towards the central interface. Her body crackled with energy as she pressed her palms against the alien tech. Streams of data flowed from her fingertips, interfacing directly with the precursor systems. The chamber erupted in blinding light as a five-dimensional star map etched itself into the very fabric of reality around them. Markel shielded his eyes, barely able to comprehend the cosmic geography unfolding before him. On the Indomitable's bridge, Heston's hands flew across his console. "Coordinates received, plotting jump vectors now." But there was no time to celebrate. The chamber's entryway exploded inward as hordes of Vrina synth drones poured through the breach. "Fall back!" Markel shouted, gathering his surviving Marines around Voight. "Protect the Doctor at all costs!" As they retreated, Markel reached for a final, desperate option. He activated the antimatter implosion lattice, praying it would buy them the seconds they needed to escape. Space-time itself screamed as the device detonated, consuming Vrina and humans alike, in a maelstrom of twisted physics. Markel felt reality unraveling around him as they sprinted for the extraction point. Just as it seemed the implosion would overtake them, Voight's eye implant pulsed. The signal raced across subspace, reaching the waiting human fleet. Aboard every surviving ship, transwarp drives howled to life. In a blinding flash of Cherenkov radiation, space tore open once more. The battered remnants of humanity's last hope surged forward, emerging at the very threshold of the convergence nexus itself. But even as they arrived, sensors detected the Vrina apocalypse, following close behind. The Indomitable shuddered as it breached the five-dimensional aperture, its hull groaning under stresses no human vessel was designed to endure. On the bridge, Admiral Blake gripped his command chair, nucleus tightening as reality itself twisted around them. "Structural integrity at 68% and falling," Lieutenant Heston called out, his voice tight. "Compensating with inertial dampeners." Blake nodded, his eyes fixed on the swirling chaos beyond the viewscreen. "Hold her together, Lieutenant. We've come too far to fail now." As the dreadnought emerged into the non-Euclidean realm, the crew gasped. Impossible geometries stretched in every direction, planes of existence folding in on themselves like origami crafted by a mad god. "Stay focused," he ordered. "Helm, take us in. Follow Voight's nav coordinates." The Indomitable's engines pulsed, propelling them deeper into the heart of the convergence nexus. Colossal archways of alien metal yawned before them, each large enough to swallow entire star systems. Deep within the megastructure, Voight led her team through twisting corridors that defied conventional physics. Marine Corporal Chen stumbled, his equilibrium thrown off by a sudden shift in gravity. They pressed on, weapons at the ready, until they reached a vast chamber pulsing with eldritch energies. At its center stood a pillar of light that seemed to stretch into infinity. "This is it," Voight breathed, "the Central Intelligence Core." She approached the pillar, her body crackling with energy as she made contact. Her eyes rolled back, neurons firing at impossible speeds as the cosmic download began. Markel watched in awe as Voight's form began to shimmer, her very being merging with the ancient AI. "Doctor!" he called out, uncertain. Voight's eyes snapped open, blazing with newfound power and knowledge. "It's time," she announced, her voice resonating with otherworldly harmonics. "Activate the archaeotech systems. Now!" Markel nodded, relaying the order to his team. They fanned out, interfacing with alien consoles that responded to their touch as if alive. Across the nexus, dormant systems roared to life. Singularity lances pierced the very fabric of space-time, creating a web of interconnected wormholes that spanned the galaxy. On the Indomitable's bridge, Blake watched as the tactical display lit up with new nodes of power. "What in the name of—" His words were cut short as Markel's voice crackled over the comm. "Admiral, we've done it. Voight's interfaced with the precursor AI. She's become something more." Blake's teeth clenched. "Understood. Initiating full power uplink to Voight's matrix." Heston's fingers danced across his console, channeling every ounce of the Indomitable's power into the uplink. The ship's lights dimmed as energy surged through conduits never meant to handle such loads. In the central chamber, Voight floated above the ground, cosmic energies swirling around her. Her eyes, now pools of starlight, fixed on some distant point beyond human comprehension. "It's begun," she intoned, her voice echoing across dimensions. The convergence nexus pulsed, waves of chronometric energy rippling outward. Reality itself buckled and warped, fundamental constants shifting like sand in a storm. Markel stumbled as the floor beneath him rippled. "Dr. Voight, what's happening?" But Voight didn't respond. Her consciousness now spread across the cosmos, touching every point of the Precursor's vast network. Through her, the transcendental engine stirred, ready to reshape the very foundations of existence. As the Nexus reached full power, a blinding light engulfed everything. Markel shielded his eyes, feeling the universe itself hold its breath in anticipation of what was to come. The universe shattered. Eliana Voight's consciousness expanded beyond the confines of her physical form, merging with the Convergence Nexus in a blinding flash of cosmic energy. Her synapses fired at impossible speeds, each thought rippling through the fabric of reality itself. Around her, the megastructure's interior pulsed with otherworldly power. Crystalline archaeotech structures realigned themselves, forming intricate geometric patterns that defied Euclidean geometry. Streams of data flowed through quantum conduits, linking Voight's mind to the vast computational network of the Precursors. In the heart of the Nexus, Voight stood motionless, her body crackling with exotic energies. Tendrils of living metal extended from the spherical walls, enveloping her in a cocoon of advanced technology. Her neural pathways fused with the ancient systems, granting her access to knowledge beyond human comprehension. As the uplink intensified, Voight felt her perception expand. She saw the universe not as a singular entity, but as a tapestry of interconnected realities. With a mere thought, she could manipulate the fundamental forces that governed existence. Outside the convergent sphere, chaos reigned. The Vrina Armada pressed their attack, their massive bio-dreadnoughts unleashing devastating barrages against the human fleet. Capital ships erupted in silent explosions, their hulls torn apart by relentless fire. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Blake gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered violently. Warning klaxons blared across the bridge, drowning out the frantic reports of his crew. "Status report!" Blake shouted, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. Lieutenant Heston's fingers danced across his console, struggling to make sense of the readings. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations emanating from the Nexus. It's rewriting the laws of physics." Blake opened his mouth to respond, but his words died in his throat as he witnessed the impossible. Space itself began to warp and twist, reality fracturing before his eyes. Shimmering fissures appeared in the void, gateways to dimensions beyond human comprehension. The first wave of hypermutational energy slammed into the Indomitable with crushing force. The ship's inertial dampeners strained against the onslaught, circuits overloading as they tried to compensate for the shifting laws of physics. "Divert all power to structural integrity," Blake ordered, his voice barely audible over the groaning of stressed metal. As the human fleet struggled to maintain cohesion, the Vrina vessels fared far worse. The alien biomachines, so finely tuned to operate within known physical parameters, began to break down at the subatomic level. Across the battlefield, Vrina dreadnoughts twisted and warped, their hulls rupturing as internal systems failed catastrophically. Swarms of hunter-killer drones calcified instantly, reduced to drifting clouds of inert nanomaterials. Even the mighty hive progenitors, the living cores of the Vrina battle fleets, found themselves defenseless against the cascading waves of hypermutation. Their once impregnable cognitive matrices destabilized, leaving the biomechanical monstrosities flailing in silent agony. A desperate Vrina battle group, sensing imminent destruction, made a final push towards the Nexus. Their scanners, designed to analyze and categorize all known forms of matter and energy, registered only indecipherable static as they approached the event horizon. In a last act of defiance, the Vrina commander ordered a full salvo of antimatter warheads against the anomaly. The weapons detonated in a blinding flash, momentarily outshining nearby stars. But even this awesome destructive power proved futile against the unfolding cosmic event. The laws of thermodynamics themselves bent and twisted, conventional matter breaking down into its component quarks before scattering across multiple dimensions. On the Indomitable's bridge, Blake watched in awe as familiar star patterns shifted and realigned. constellations transformed into vast, multi-dimensional machinery, each celestial body a cog in some incomprehensible cosmic engine. "Sir," Heston called out, his voice trembling, "we're losing contact with everything. Sensors, comms, navigation. It's all going dark." As the hypermutation wave expanded outward at impossible speeds, consuming galaxies in the blink of an eye, the last vestiges of conventional reality began to fade. The Indomitable, along with the surviving human fleet, underwent a transformation beyond the limits of physical description. At the center of it all, Eliana Voigt, no longer bound by the constraints of her human form, became a nexus of infinite possibility. Her consciousness expanded across countless realities, seeding the building blocks of a new existence for humanity. In the final moments before transcendence, as the known universe dissolved into a sea of pure potential, Voigt shared a fleeting connection with every human mind, a promise of a future free from conflict, a cosmos of boundless exploration and discovery. Then, with a silent flash that echoed across all of creation, humanity shed its physical form and ascended to a higher plane of existence. The age of flesh and blood came to an end, and a new chapter in the cosmic story began. Vincent Coleman's luminous form pulsed with newfound power as he directed the celestial enforcer fleets across the hyperdimensional battlefield. His consciousness expanded, simultaneously aware of countless fronts in this cosmic war. Phalanx Alpha, reinforced the quantum barrier at Sector 793, he transmitted, his thoughts manifesting as pure information. Beta Squadron, initiate reality anchor protocols along the manifold periphery. Around him, the transcendent Dreadnought's command nexus hummed with arcane energies. Streams of data flowed through him, each particle a tactical update from across the newborn universe. A sudden surge of turbulence rippled through the fabric of space-time. Vincent's attention snapped to a critical weak point in their defenses. A massive Varina synth drone armada had breached the outer perimeter, its corrupting influence already seeping into the surrounding sectors. Celestial Enforcer units, converge on Breachpoint Epsilon. Vincent's command echoed across the infosphere. In response, swarms of nano-manifold war machines coalesced from the very substance of reality. The two forces clashed in a maelstrom of impossible geometries and mind-bending physics. Vincent watched as his creations engaged the Varina synth fleets, their very existence a contradiction to the invaders' corrupting algorithms. Their Varina dreadcluster lashed out with tendrils of entropic energy, threatening to unravel an entire sector of space-time. Vincent reacted instinctively, reaching out with his newfound abilities to manipulate the fundamental forces of the cosmos. He felt the fabric of reality bend to his will as he wove a complex lattice of quantum filaments, reinforcing the threatened sector. The Varina assault crashed against this barrier, its destructive power dissipating into harmless bursts of exotic particles. "Voigt," Vincent called out through their quantum uplink. "We need to seal these incursion points. The Celestial Enforcer can hold them back, but we can't keep fighting on all fronts indefinitely." Eliana Voigt's avatar shimmered into existence beside him, her form a swirling vortex of pure energy and information. "Agreed. I'm reconfiguring the space-time anchors to create a hyperspheric containment field, but I need time." Vincent nodded, his consciousness already formulating new strategies. "You'll have it. All units prepare for Operation Firewall." At his command, the Celestial Enforcer armadas began a coordinated assault. Quantized distortion lances sliced through swathes of Varina synth critters, reducing them to disorganized waveforms. Fractal laser matrices expanded, creating intricate webs of defensive fire that repelled wave after wave of psionic hunter swarms. As the battle raged, Vincent felt a familiar presence coalesce nearby. Admiral Blake's psionic matrix, though fragmented and destabilized, still clung to existence. "Coleman?" Blake's voice echoed weakly through the quantum ether. "The Varina, but they're adapting. We need a new approach." Vincent processed this information, running countless simulations through his expanded consciousness in the span of a microsecond. "Admiral, your matrix is critically unstable. We need to get you to a safe sector for reconstitution." "No time," Blake insisted, his essence flickering. "I have one last play. Divert power from my matrix to the Celestial Enforcer. Use my energy to boost its output." Vincent hesitated, knowing what this would mean for Blake's consciousness, but in the face of total annihilation, there was no room for sentiment. "Understood, Admiral. Your sacrifice won't be in vain." Across the battlefield, the tide began to turn. The Varina's relentless advance faltered as they encountered layer upon layer of increasingly sophisticated defenses. Their assimilation algorithms, once unstoppable, now struggled against the rapidly evolving countermeasures of the Celestial Enforcer's creations. Vincent pressed the advantage, directing his forces in a sweeping counter-offensive. Salvation Annihilation lances carved paths through the Varina's ranks, while chrono-caustic singularity drivers warped the very fabric of space-time around the invaders, trapping entire fleets in temporal stasis. As the battle reached its crescendo, Voight's voice rang out across the quantum uplink. "Vincent, the hyperspheric containment field is ready. On your mark, we can seal off this section of the manifold and purge the Varina presence." Vincent surveyed the cosmic battlefield one last time, watching as his forces drove the Varina back on all fronts. With a thought, he issued the final command. "All units, initiate emergency phase shift. Voight, activate the containment field." The universe seemed to hold its breath for a moment. Then, with a silent flash that rippled across countless dimensions, the hyperspheric field snapped into place. The Varina invasion force, caught off guard by this impossible maneuver, found itself suddenly cut off from its source of power. Vincent Coleman's consciousness surged across the hyperdimensional battlefield, directing swarms of celestial enforcers against the relentless Varina assault. Massive hyper-dreadnoughts, their hulls pulsing with arcane energies, unleashed devastating barrages from transdimensional strike cannons. The fabric of reality itself buckled and warped under the onslaught. "Enforcer Squadron Delta, reinforce the quantum bulwark at coordinates 7s and 93 Epsilon," Vincent transmitted, his thoughts manifesting as pure information across the battlefield. The celestial war machines responded instantly, their impossible geometries shifting and reforming as they moved to intercept a massive Varina submatrix node. Vincent watched as the corrupting influence of the alien construct spread, threatening to destabilize an entire sector of the newborn cosmos. "Initiate celestial purge protocols," Vincent commanded, his decision made in a fraction of a picosecond. Enormous fabricator nodes hummed to life, channeling void compression fields on a galactic scale. Space-time itself began to constrict around the Varina node, reality twisting and folding in on itself. The alien construct's entropic corruption flickered and stuttered, its very existence being phased out of coherent reality. A blinding flash erupted across multiple dimensions as the submatrix collapsed into a harmonic singularity. The threat had been excised from the manifold, but at a terrible cost. Vincent watched in grim silence as entire fleets of friendly enforcers were dragged into the purge vortex, their higher dimensional forms shredded by the cosmic forces they had unleashed. In the central nexus, Eliana Voight's avatar pulsed with concern. Her expanded consciousness detected new incursions, more virulent strains of Varina invasion vectors probing the unprotected fringes of the manifold. "Vincent," she transmitted across their quantum link, "we have multiple breaches in tertiary sectors. The Varina are adapting faster than we can fortify." Voight's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, directing mass energy anchoring subroutines to harden the cosmic substrates. But for every breach she sealed, two more appeared. The Varina collective submatrix exploited quantum-level instabilities, injecting cascading anomalies that threatened to unravel entire multiversal frameworks. "We need a more permanent solution," Voight realized, her mind racing through countless simulations, initiating precursor fail-safe protocols. As she spoke, a massive transdimensional wormhole yawned open before her, flooding the Nexus with otherworldly energies. Voight felt the raw potential of creation itself flowing through her, the power to reshape reality at its most fundamental level. But before she could harness this awesome force, alarms blared across her consciousness. A Vrina strike force had penetrated the defensive grid, launching a barrage of antimatter missiles directly at the Nexus. "Vincent!" Voight called out, her avatar flickering as she diverted power to emergency shields. Across the battlefield, Vincent's celestial form pivoted, abandoning the main offensive. He streaked towards the Nexus, pushing his hyperdimensional propulsion systems beyond their limits. Time itself seemed to stretch and warp around him as he raced to intercept the Vrina attack. The antimatter warheads closed in on Voight's position, their destructive potential capable of unraveling the very fabric of the newborn cosmos. Vincent pushed harder, his form becoming a streak of pure energy as he hurtled across impossible distances. "Hold on, Eliana," he transmitted, pouring every ounce of his will into this final desperate maneuver. Vincent's battered form materialized in a swirling vortex of quantum foam, his celestial armada emerging behind him in a staggered formation. The newborn cosmos stretched out before them, vast and unfamiliar. Where once there had been familiar constellations and galactic clusters, now strange refractory patterns rippled across the fabric of space-time. He reached out with his expanded consciousness, probing the altered physics of this reborn reality. The fundamental forces responded differently, subtly reshaped by Voight's transcendent imprinting. Gravitational waves propagated along new vectors, while electromagnetic fields pulsed with an unfamiliar rhythm. "Status report," Vincent transmitted to his remaining units. "All celestial enforcers initiate full-spectrum analysis of local space-time metrics." Data streams flooded his awareness as the Armada's sensors scanned the surrounding sectors. Vincent processed the information in picoseconds, his mind racing to comprehend the new cosmic paradigm they faced. A nearby star cluster caught his attention. Its stellar nurseries blazed with unusual intensity, newborn suns igniting at an accelerated rate. Vincent zoomed in, observing molecular clouds coalescing into protostars with unprecedented efficiency. "Fascinating," he mused. Voight's algorithms seem to have optimized stellar formation processes. As Vincent continued his survey, alarms suddenly blared across the celestial network. A portal was forming at the edge of the local galactic supercluster, its event horizon writhing with entropic energy. "Vrina incursion detected," a celestial enforcer reported. "They found a way to breach the new reality matrix." Vincent's consciousness expanded, encompassing the entire threatened sector. He could sense the alien presence probing the edges of this fledgling cosmos, searching for weaknesses to exploit. The celestial armada surged forward, weapons primed and energy shields flaring to life. As they approached the forming portal, Vincent channeled power into the focusing archaeotech they had salvaged from the precursor catacombs. A beam of pure chronochromatic energy lanced out from Vincent's flagship, striking the portal's unstable event horizon. The fabric of space-time buckled and warped under the assault, the very laws of physics straining against the intrusion of Vrina corruption. "Hold the line!" Vincent transmitted as the first wave of Vrina synth drones poured through the collapsing portal. "We cannot allow them to gain a foothold in this reality." The celestial enforcers engaged the enemy, their weapons capitalizing on the altered physics of the new cosmos. Quantum disruptors tore through Vrina battle clusters, while gravity lances bent space-time itself to crush entire swarms of invaders. Vincent pushed his newly enhanced abilities to their limits, reaching out to manipulate the underlying fabric of reality. He wove intricate patterns of cosmic strings, creating a tapestry of defensive barriers that the Vrina struggled to penetrate. As the battle raged, Vincent became aware of a growing resonance within the surrounding space-time. It was as if the very cosmos itself was responding to the threat, Voight's imprinted algorithms activating latent defense mechanisms. Streams of exotic particles coalesced around the invading Vrina forces, disrupting their corrupting influence. The laws of physics seemed to warp and twist, rejecting the alien presence like antibodies attacking an infection. Vincent watched in awe as the newborn cosmos fought back against its would-be destroyers. For the first time, he dared to hope that this reality might truly be humanity's final sanctuary, a universe not just shaped in their image, but actively hostile to the Vrina threat. The portal began to destabilize, its event horizon fluctuating wildly as the cosmic defense mechanisms intensified. Vincent seized the opportunity, directing the full might of his armada against the weakening breach. The celestial enforcers unleashed a devastating barrage, their weapons augmented by the strange new physics of this reality. The portal's event horizon shuddered and collapsed, severing the Vrina's connection to their home dimension. As the last echoes of the battle faded, Vincent surveyed the aftermath. The newborn cosmos had weathered its first test, emerging stronger and more resilient. But he knew this was only the beginning. The Vrina would return, and humanity would need to be ready. Vincent turned his attention to the vast expanse of uncharted space that lay before them. Somewhere out there, the secrets of this new reality awaited discovery, secrets that could ensure humanity's survival in the face of an implacable foe. "Celestial enforcers," Vincent transmitted, his voice carrying across the quantum network. "Prepare for deep space deployment. We have a universe to explore and to defend." The celestial dreadnought's engines pulsed with otherworldly energy as Vincent guided it through the gargantuan breach in the Dyson Sphere's hull. Debris fields of twisted metal and crystalline shards scraped against the ship's quantum shields, casting eerie shadows across the command deck. Vincent's hands danced across holographic interfaces, adjusting their approach vector. "All units prepare for umbilical docking, weapons hot, but do not fire unless fired upon." The vast interior of the megasphere stretched out before them, a pocket universe of impossible scale. Towering spires of alien architecture pierced the artificial sky, their surfaces etched with pulsing circuitry that seemed to breathe with sentient energy. As the dreadnought descended, automated defense turrets swiveled to track their approach. Lances of coherent light stabbed out, only to be absorbed by the ship's adaptive shielding. "Return fire, precision strikes only," Vincent ordered. "We need this structure intact." The dreadnought's quantum lances lashed out, surgically dismantling the hostile emplacements. Explosions rippled across the megasphere's inner surface, brief flares of light against the backdrop of eternal twilight. With a shudder that reverberated through the ship's superstructure, umbilical docking pylons extended, latching onto a colossal landing platform. Vincent felt the deck plates vibrate beneath his feet as the airlock cycled. "Celestial infantry, form up," he commanded, checking the charge on his personal sidearm. "Nexus Archaeotech team, stay close. We don't know what we're walking into." The airlock hissed open, revealing a cavernous docking bay. Vincent led the first wave of troops down the umbilical, boots clanging against metal as they fanned out to secure a perimeter. Alien machinery hummed all around them, pulsing with energy that set Vincent's teeth on edge. The air crackled with ozone and something else, an indescribable scent that spoke of realities beyond human comprehension. "Sir?" a celestial scout called out, detecting power signatures ahead. "Looks like some kind of stasis field." Vincent approached the indicated area, where a series of pod-like structures stood arranged in concentric circles. Each pod glowed with a soft blue light, obscuring the contents within. "Archaeotech team analysis," Vincent ordered. The lead researcher stepped forward, scanning devices whirring. "Incredible! These are quantum stasis crypts, sir, and they're still active." Vincent's hand hovered over the control interface of the nearest crypt. "Life signs?" "Affirmative," the researcher confirmed. "Humanoid, but there's something different about the readings." With a deep breath, Vincent initiated the revival sequence. The crypt's outer shell retracted, mist spilling out as the stasis field collapsed. A figure stirred within, features coming into focus. Vincent's eyes widened in recognition. Marcus Ramirez? The grizzled form of his old comrade materialized, eyes snapping open with a gasp. Ramirez stumbled forward, caught by Vincent's steadying grip. "Vincent," Ramirez croaked, voice rough from disuse. Where are we?" Before Vincent could respond, other crypts began to activate. Admiral Blake emerged from one, followed by Lieutenant Heston from another. More familiar faces appeared, each bearing the same confused expression. As the survivors gathered, Ramirez's gaze sharpened. "I remember some fragments, the war, the Vrina assault, but after that—" Vincent nodded, pieces falling into place. "We need to compare notes, old friend. I think we've stumbled onto something far bigger than we ever imagined." As Ramirez began to recount his fractured memories, Vincent's mind raced. The implications were staggering. This megasphere, this entire reality, it wasn't just a refuge. It was a crucible, forged from the very essence of humanity's last stand. And now, as the distant stirrings of the Varina threat loomed on the cosmic horizon, Vincent knew their work had only just begun. Vincent Coleman stood at the command nexus, his face illuminated by the flickering holographic displays. Sweat beaded on his brow as he surveyed the chaos unfolding across the megasphere. A celestial officer's voice crackled over the comm. "Sir, outer defenses are failing. Sectors 17 through 23 have been breached. We're losing ground fast." Vincent's fingers danced across the control interface, rerouting power to critical systems. The entire structure shuddered as another volley of Vrina weapons impacted the hull. "Ramirez, what's your situation?" Vincent called out. Marcus Ramirez's voice came through, punctuated by the sound of distant explosions. "We're holding the line at Promenade Delta, but barely. These bastards just keep coming." On the tactical display, Vincent watched as swarms of red markers swarmed over the blue defensive positions. He gritted his teeth, knowing each lost sector meant more of his people dead or assimilated. Blake's response was grim. "We've distributed most of our heavy ordnance, but it's not enough. The Varina are adapting faster than we can counter." Vincent smacked his palm on the console. "Damn it, we need more time." As if in answer to his plea, the entire command center suddenly plunged into darkness. For a heartbeat, Vincent feared the worst, total systems failure. But then an otherworldly hum began to build, resonating through the very structure of the megasphere. Emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the room in an eerie blue glow. Vincent's comm crackled with urgent transmissions from across the battlefield. "Command, what's happening? Our weapons are powering down." Vincent's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. "Void," he whispered. The holographic displays came back online, showing a wave of energy radiating outward from the megasphere's core. It washed over friend and foe alike, rewriting the very fabric of reality in its wake. Vincent watched in awe as Varina war machines crumbled, their corrupting influence unraveling in the face of this new cosmic paradigm. Celestial warriors stood unharmed, their weapons and armor suddenly resonating with newfound power. "All units, press the advantage," Vincent ordered, his voice filled with renewed vigor. "Drive them back." Across the megasphere, the tide of battle shifted. Celestial forces surged forward, their weapons now cutting through Vrina defenses like they were made of paper. The synthetic hordes retreated in disarray, unable to adapt to this fundamental shift in reality. Vincent's comm lit up with a priority transmission from the quantum codex chambers. Eliana Voigt's voice came through, strained but triumphant. "Vincent, I've done it. The megasphere, it's awake. We've rewritten the rules of engagement." As Vincent absorbed the implications of Voigt's words, he turned his attention to the massive viewscreen dominating the command center. Beyond the megasphere's hull, the fabric of space itself seemed to ripple and flex, conforming to new cosmic laws that favored humanity's survival. The Varina invasion force, once an unstoppable tide, now found itself trapped in a reality that rejected its very existence. Vincent watched as entire sections of the enemy fleet simply unraveled, their component atoms scattering into the void. All units, Vincent transmitted, his voice steady and resolute. Prepare for full counter-offensive. We're taking the fight to them. As the Celestial Legions rallied, Vincent couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. For the first time since the war began, humanity had a real chance not just to survive, but to win. The command center shuddered as reality itself buckled and warped. Vincent steadied himself against the holographic display, watching in awe as the laws of physics bent to humanity's will. Vincent's eyes darted across the tactical readouts. Countless red markers representing enemy ships winked out, replaced by drifting debris fields. He zoomed in on a nearby sector, witnessing the carnage firsthand. A massive Varina dreadnought, once an unstoppable juggernaut, now hung lifeless in space. Its hull, once pulsing with corrupting energy, dulled to a lifeless grey. Smaller synthetic craft spun aimlessly, their propulsion systems sputtering and dying. Celestial warships surged forward, their weapon systems suddenly supercharged by the new cosmic paradigm. Antimatter warheads streaked across the void, detonating with reality-rending force. Where once they might have merely scratched Varina armor, now they tore entire squadrons asunder. Vincent watched as a celestial boarding team breached the hull of a crippled enemy vessel. Their feed showed chaotic corridors filled with writhing, malfunctioning synthetics. A trooper raised his arm, deploying a hypermetabolic virus canister. The mist spread rapidly, dissolving Varina constructs into inert sludge. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout the megasphere," another officer reported. "Automated defense systems are coming online." Deep within the structure's labyrinthine interior, ancient machinery stirred to life. Eldritch energy lances lashed out, vaporizing any remaining Varina presence. Distortion matrices rippled through compromised habitats, scrubbing away every last trace of the invaders. Vincent's attention snapped back to the main view screen as the megasphere's outer hull began to change. The dull metal transmuted before his eyes, shifting into an iridescent material that defied description. Geometric patterns flowed and reshaped themselves, forming a mesmerizing fractal spheroid. "My God," Ramirez breathed, stepping up beside Vincent. "What's happening?" Before Vincent could respond, a priority transmission cut through the comm chatter. Eliana Voigt's voice, tinged with an otherworldly resonance, filled the command center. "Vincent, the transformation is complete. The megasphere has ascended to its true form, a celestial hyperconstruct." As if to punctuate her words, a blinding flash of light erupted from the heart of the megasphere. When it faded, Vincent beheld a figure that both was and wasn't Voight. Her form radiated pure quantum energy, eyes blazing with the power of creation itself. "The imprinted codebases have been activated," Voight's avatar continued. "Reality itself now bends to our will." Vincent struggled to process the implications. And the Varina? As if to prove her point, the few remaining Varina capital ships began to unravel at the seams. Their hulls twisted and warped, dissolving into streams of subatomic particles that dispersed into the void. Vincent turned to Ramirez, his voice low. "Assemble scouting parties. We need to see the full extent of these changes." Hours later, reports flooded in from across the megasphere. Where once there were ravaged terrestrial sectors, now sprawling hypermanifolds twisted through impossible geometries. Fractal corridors spiraled endlessly, defying conventional space-time. A vanguard team transmitted footage of their journey through one such manifold. Vincent watched in fascination as the soldiers' forms subtly shifted, optimizing themselves for this new reality. Muscles densified, synapses fired with impossible speed, and a faint aura of energy surrounded each trooper. "Sir," one of them reported, voice filled with wonder, "we feel different, stronger, like we're evolving with each step." Vincent nodded, understanding dawning. This was humanity's true inheritance, not just a refuge but a forge to remake themselves into something greater. Yet even as elation filled him, a sobering thought cut through Vincent's mind. They had won this battle, but the war was nowhere near the end. The Vrina would return, and when they did, It would be with the full might of their reality-spanning empire. Vincent's gaze hardened as he looked out at the transformed megasphere, now an impregnable bastion against the coming storm. They had been given a gift beyond measure, but with it came a terrible responsibility. "All units," he transmitted, voice steady and resolute, "prepare for the next phase. The Vrina will be back and we'll be ready for them." The command nexus thrummed with raw power as Vincent Coleman stood at its heart, his eyes fixed on the holographic displays surrounding him. Streams of data cascaded across the screens, each pixel a testament to the megasphere's metamorphosis into something beyond mere technology. "Sir, interdimensional probes detected," a sensor officer called out, her voice taut with tension. "Vrina recon drones piercing our reality barriers." Vincent's teeth gritted. "Show me." The main view screen shifted, revealing swarms of insectoid machines probing the hypermutational force field. Their metallic carapaces glinted in the void as they searched for any weakness in humanity's newfound sanctuary. No sooner had the words left his mouth than alarms blared throughout the megasphere. The first wave of Vrina death fleets translated into real space, their hulls overflowing with weaponry. The megasphere's outer manifold erupted in a dazzling light show, as exotic warheads and phase disruptor salvos slammed against it. For a moment, Vincent feared the worst, but the hyperspatial defenses held firm. "Return fire," he ordered. Celestial defense batteries sprang to life. Transwarp accelerators spat streams of hypervelocity projectiles, while singularity projectors tore holes in the fabric of spacetime itself. Via Rhina ships crumpled and imploded as the barrage tore through their ranks. On the front lines, Marcus Ramirez stood atop a ferro-crystal battlement, his Ravager bodyguards flanking him. He watched as swarms of Vrina hunter-killers smashed against the hyperspatial ramparts, their energy weapons flaring. "Adjust point defense grid Alpha 7, Ramirez barked into his comm. "Those hive strikers are probing for weak points." A nearby celestial gunner acknowledged, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. Moments later, a wall of hyper-accelerated flak shredded an incoming wave of attack drones. But the Vrina assault was relentless. A massive synth juggernaut, easily the size of a small moon, suddenly materialized near the outer defenses. Its hull pulsed with eldritch energies as it unleashed a barrage that shattered ferro-crystal embrasures. Ramirez watched in horror as hordes of synth drone warriors poured through the breach. "We've got boarders," he shouted. "All Hellsinger units, converge on my position." The corridors of the megasphere became a brutal battleground. Newly augmented celestial enforcers clashed with the invading synthetics, their bodies shimmering with distortion sheaths that allowed them to phase through enemy fire. Ramirez led from the front, his archaeotech battlesuit humming with barely contained power. He thrust a hyperlance through the chest of a towering Vrina warform, the weapon's energy core overloading and vaporizing the synthetic from within. Days blurred together as the conflict raged. Vincent watched from the command nexus as sectors fell and were retaken, the tide of battle ebbing and flowing. But slowly, inexorably, the celestial defenders began to gain the upper hand. Yet even as the last synth drone was driven from the megasphere's hallways, a new threat loomed. Eliana Voight's holographic form materialized beside Vincent, her expression grave. "The outer manifold integrity is degrading," she reported. "These constant bombardments. If the Vrina launch another full-scale assault, we could lose cohesion across entire sections of our reality matrix." Vincent's mind raced. They needed a new strategy, and fast. He turned to his assembled warlords, each bearing the scars of recent combat. "Options," he demanded. Admiral Blake stepped forward, his cybernetic eye whirring as it processed tactical data. "We could launch a preemptive strike," he suggested. "Use our singularity lances to sever their interdimensional transit vectors, cut off their reinforcements." Ramirez shook his head, still clad in his battle-scarred armor. "Too risky," he countered. "Our matrix is still stabilizing. One wrong move, and we could unravel everything we've built." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Vincent. He closed his eyes, weighing the choices before him. When he opened them again, his gaze was steel. "We go with Voight's plan," he declared. "Trigger the exponential cascade. It's time we rewrite reality itself." Vincent strode to the main control interface, his fingers dancing across holographic keys. Deep within the megasphere's core, titanic reactors roared to life, channeling unfathomable energies into hyperforges buried in the construct's very foundations. The megasphere shuddered as manifold anchor nodes erupted along its hull. Vincent watched in awe as torrents of photonic code spewed forth, rewriting the very fabric of spacetime. The old laws of physics began to crumble, replaced by new axioms shaped by humanity's will. But the Vrina would not go quietly. Their fleets redoubled their assault, entropy cannons and collapsitron harpoons lashing out against the nascent reality matrix. For a heart-stopping moment, Vincent feared it wouldn't be enough. Then, as if in answer to his unspoken prayer, the Hyperweaver's influence began to spread exponentially. Parsecs of space transmuted in the blink of an eye, the new transcendent base code expanding outward at impossible speeds. In a final bold strategy, the Vrina unleashed their ultimate weapons, hypernova inceptors targeted at the megasphere's core sun. Vincent's hands flew across the control nexus, activating countermeasures even as the antimatter-laced munitions streaked towards their target. Time seemed to slow as the inceptors neared the star's corona. Then, with a flash that seared even the augmented retinas of the celestial crew, the attacks simply unraveled. Tesseract dispersal lenses refracted the incoming force, scattering it harmlessly against impenetrable quantum fields. Vincent watched in stunned silence as the violence of the Vrina assault was transmuted, each wave of destruction only serving to strengthen and expand the new reality matrix. The sensors screamed as local spacetime itself underwent forced hypermutation, a protective hypersphere engulfing the entire star system. As the last Vrina Vanguard ships were subsumed into ontological singularities, Vincent allowed himself a moment of pure, unadulterated awe. They had done it. They had rewritten the very laws of existence. Vincent Coleman stood at the helm of the celestial flagship, his eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of hyperspace as they approached the Zytron cluster. The ship's hull vibrated with raw power, its hyperspatial engines pushing the boundaries of physics. "Prepare for real space translation," he ordered, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his gut. The view screen flared as reality reasserted itself. Before them lay the Zytron system, a yellow dwarf star surrounded by a cluster of planets and a dense asteroid belt. Vincent's grip tightened on the command console. A holographic display sprang to life, highlighting Vrina mining operations scattered throughout the system's outer reaches. Vincent's lips curled into a tight smile. "The Singularity Lances, full spread. Target those outposts." The ship's weapons officer nodded, her fingers dancing across the control interface. Moments later, lances of pure gravitational force lashed out, tearing through space-time itself. Vincent watched with grim satisfaction as Vrina structures crumpled and imploded, crushed by localized singularities. "Meteor swarms deployed," Admiral Blake reported from his station. "Impact in 3, 2 to 1. The asteroid belt erupted in a hail of hyper-accelerated rocks, each one guided by quantum targeting systems. They slammed into Vrina defensive positions with devastating force, shattering energy shields and rupturing hull plating. Vincent keyed his comms. "Ramirez, you're clear for planetfall. Give 'em hell." On the planet's surface, Marcus Ramirez felt the ground shake as drop pods slammed into Zytron III's crust. The hatch blew open, and he stepped out onto alien soil, his heavy world armor adjusting instantly to the increased gravity. "Hellsingers, form up," he roared, watching as massive mech walkers stomped into formation around him. "Target those bunkers." The walkers' gravitic accelerators whined as they powered up, then unleashed a barrage that reduced Vrina fortifications to rubble. Ramirez grinned fiercely, but his expression hardened as he saw waves of synth drones pouring from underground hangars. Antimatter warheads screamed towards them, their detonations capable of annihilating matter itself. But instead of destruction, Ramirez watched in awe as the celestial quantum deflectors activated. The warheads simply unraveled, their constituent particles breaking down and reforming into harmless energy slurries. Back on the command ship, Vincent received Eliana Voigt's transmission. "Archaeotech borers in position," she reported, "initiating synaptic uplink now." Vincent watched the planet's surface on the main view screen. At first, nothing seemed to change. Then, like ripples in a pond, reality itself began to warp and twist. Mountains fractured into impossible geometries, while plains undulated with tesseract patterns. "My God," Admiral Blake whispered, staring at the sensor readings. "The entire planet's molecular structure is rewriting itself." Vincent nodded grimly. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice low. "Prepare the seed ships, we're taking the entire system." As the hours passed, Vincent coordinated the assault from orbit. He watched as Admiral Blake's fighters tore through Verena capital ships, their Farsic lances carving molten gashes in synth metal hulls. On the ground, Ramirez's forces pushed ever northward, securing beachhead after beachhead, as Zytron III's very nature shifted around them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of battle, Vincent received the message he'd been waiting for. Ramirez's voice crackled over the comms, tinged with awe and exhaustion. "Sir, we've done it. The planet is ours." Vincent allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before turning to his crew. "Excellent work, all of you. But we're not done yet. Bring the seed ships online. It's time to claim this entire system for humanity." As fabricator vessels swarmed through the Zytron cluster, Vincent felt a profound sense of purpose. They weren't just winning a war, they were reshaping reality itself. And as he watched Zytron's star pulse with newfound quasi-sentience, he knew that this was only the first step in a much grander journey. But even as they celebrated their victory, Vincent's thoughts turned to the battles yet to come. Reports were already flooding in of massive Verena fleets gathering at the edges of known space. The true test of humanity's transcendence was still to come. The echoes of battle still reverberated through the Zytron system as Vincent Coleman stood before the holographic war table. His eyes scanned the incoming data streams, a frown etching deep lines across his face. "Sir, urgent intelligence update," a junior officer called out, her voice taut with tension. Vincent's head snapped up. "Report." The officer's fingers danced across her datapad. "Long-range sensors have detected massive Verena fleet movements. They're converging from all sectors, sir. It's unprecedented." Admiral Blake leaned in, his cybernetic eye whirring as it processed the tactical overlay. "By the stars," he breathed. "They're marshalling everything they have. This isn't just an counterattack, it's an extinction-level event." Before Vincent could respond, Eliana Voigt's avatar flickered to life. Her face was ashen. "There's more," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've intercepted transmissions about a new Verena bioweapon, hypermetabolic virions, capable of infecting our base code matrices at the subatomic level." The command center fell silent, the weight of this revelation settling over them like a shroud. Vincent's mind raced, calculating possibilities, discarding options. "We need a war council," he declared, "now." Minutes later, Vincent stood before his most trusted advisors. Ramirez, Blake, and Voight. The holographic displays pulsed with dire projections, each scenario more grim than the last. "Conventional tactics won't cut it," Ramirez growled, his scarred face set in grim lines. "We need to hit them hard, fast, and where it hurts most." Admiral Blake nodded. "Agreed, but where? Their fleets are too dispersed, too numerous." Vincent's eyes narrowed as an audacious plan began to form. "We don't target their fleets," he said slowly. "We go for the source. A three-pronged assault to cripple their ability to produce these virions and disrupt their entire war machine." He turned to Blake. "Admiral, I want you to lead hit-and-run strikes on their shipyards in the Oryx Nebula. Use the meteor corridors to slip past their defenses. Blake's cybernetic eye glowed with fierce approval. It'll be a knife fight in a phone booth, but we'll make it work. Vincent shifted his gaze to Ramirez. Marcus, you'll take our best shock troops to the Rylus Void. There's a Virian research station there. I need you to capture it intact. Finally, Vincent faced Eliana. Those hyperphase disruptors you've been working on, are they ready for field testing? Eliana hesitated. Theoretically, yes, but... Good, Vincent cut her off, because I'm going to use them to hit the heart of the Vrina collective, Kalidos. The room erupted in a cacophony of protests and questions. Vincent raised a hand, silencing them. I know it's risky, but if we can corrupt their central intelligence, we can throw their entire operation into chaos. He looked each of them in the eye. This is our only shot. Are you with me? One by one they nodded. The die was cast. Hours later, Vincent watched from the bridge of his command ship as the operation unfolded across 3 fronts. In the Orcs Nebula, Blake's fleet unleashed a furious barrage against Vrina dry docks. Antimatter warheads bloomed like deadly flowers, their detonations silhouetted against the nebula's swirling gases. Status on Ramirez? Vincent barked. A communications officer responded, Hellsinger units have made planetfall on Rylus, sir. They're engaging heavy resistance at the research facility. Vincent nodded grimly. Now it was his turn. His strike craft screamed towards Kalidos, a planet that pulsed with artificial life. Vrina defense platforms opened fire, filling space with a lethal web of energy beams. Vincent's pilots wove through the onslaught with preternatural skill, their enhanced reflexes pushing their ships to the very limits of what was physically possible. As they pierced the atmosphere, Vincent felt the familiar lurch of deceleration. Through the viewports he caught glimpses of an alien landscape, crystalline spires and pulsing energy conduits stretching to the horizon. The moment they touched down, all hell broke loose. Synth drone swarms boiled out of hidden bunkers, their weapons spitting streams of subatomic shredders. Vincent's troops deployed in perfect formation, their hypersheath armor glimmering as it deflected the worst of the assault. Push forward, Vincent roared, leading from the front. He primed a vortex grenade and hurled it into the midst of an advancing synth drone phalanx. The detonation warped space itself, reducing the constructs to their component atoms. But the Vrina were far from defeated. A wave of entropic energy washed over the celestial lines, causing quantum envelopes to fluctuate and fail. Vincent watched in horror as several of his soldiers simply unraveled, their very existence erased from reality. Calibrating final parameters, Eliana's voice crackled back. 30 seconds. Those 30 seconds felt like an eternity, as Vincent and his forces fought for every inch of ground. Just when it seemed they would be overwhelmed, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Disruptors active, Eliana announced. Vincent didn't hesitate. Full power broadcast across all frequencies. The effect was immediate and devastating. Synth drones froze mid-motion. Their neural clusters scrambled by the adaptive hyperwaves. The disruption spread like a shockwave, cascading through the Vrina's interconnected systems. Seizing the moment, Vincent led a charge towards the central Nexus citadel. They blasted through outer defenses weakened by the disruptors, only to find themselves face-to-face with something straight out of a nightmare. Towering constructs, each the size of a small starship, unfurled from within the citadel's very structure. Their surfaces rippled with malevolent intelligence as they disgorged swarms of nanoscale attackers. "Fall back," Vincent ordered, his mind racing for a solution. As his troops retreated, he felt the weight of a decision that could change the course of the war, and possibly the fate of humanity itself. With a silent prayer, Vincent activated the archaeotech device built into his battlesuit. Reality itself seemed to hiccup as a contained singularity gate yawned open, connecting directly to the celestial megasphere. What emerged defied description, lances of pure possibility, hypergeometric energies focused to world-shattering intensity. They slammed into the Virina mega-constructs with apocalyptic force. The alien machines didn't so much explode as transmute. Their very substance fractured and reformed, subsumed into patterns more aligned with celestial base code. The effect spread rapidly, overtaking the entire Kaleidos complex. In the span of heartbeats, the pulsing heart of the Verena collective fell silent. Their galactic network, severed from its central node, began to unravel. Vincent stared at the fallen citadel, his chest heaving. They had won, but at a terrible cost. The ground was littered with the bodies of his soldiers, their sacrifice ensuring humanity's survival. As the dust settled, Vincent keyed his long-range comm. "This is Coleman. Kaleidos has fallen. Repeat, Kaleidos has fallen. All units, initiate Phase 2. We take this fight to every last Verena stronghold until the galaxy is ours." The celestial millennium had dawned, but Vincent knew the true battle was just beginning. Vincent stood motionless, his spectral form flickering against the maelstrom of dissolving realities. The shard in his grasp pulsed weakly, its light barely visible amidst the chaotic energies tearing apart the fabric of existence. He watched as entire star systems unraveled before his eyes, reduced to swirling clouds of quarks and leptons. The howling of dimensional rifts filled his consciousness, a cacophony of reality tearing itself apart. "No," Vincent whispered, his voice barely audible above the cosmic destruction. "Not like this, not after everything we've sacrificed." With supreme effort, he focused his will on the shard. Its glow intensified, responding to his indomitable spirit. Vincent poured every ounce of his being into this last fragment of humanity's legacy. Around him, the remnants of shattered Matryoshka fabricators drifted aimlessly. Once mighty constructs capable of reshaping entire planets, now reduced to little more than cosmic debris. Vincent reached out, drawing the scattered components towards him with his transcendent abilities. As he worked, memories flashed through his mind. The triumphs and losses, the countless battles fought across the stars. He saw Ramirez leading his Helsingers into the maw of Verena strongholds, watched as Voight's hyperweavers birthed miracles of technology. "We will endure," Vincent growled, his perseverance growing with each passing moment. The shard blazed brighter, tendrils of energy reaching out to connect with the drifting Matryoshka fragments. Slowly, painstakingly, a new structure began to take shape around Vincent. It was crude compared to the wonders they had once built, but it pulsed with potential, a seed of rebirth amidst the dying embers of creation. Vincent sensed the last vestiges of the Verena consciousness fading into oblivion, their grand designs crumbling to dust. Yet even as his enemies vanished, so too did the allies and comrades he had fought beside for so long. He couldn't hear Caleb's voice anymore, couldn't feel the reassuring presence of Admiral Blake or Eliana Voight. They were gone, scattered across infinite diverging realities, perhaps to live out countless alternate histories. But here, in this fragmented pocket of existence, Vincent Coleman stood alone. Guardian of humanity's final spark, architect of its potential resurrection. The shard continued to pulse, each beat a defiant cry against the encroaching void. "From this seed," Vincent intoned, his words carrying the weight of creation itself, "we will rise again, stronger, wiser, unbound by the limitations of our former existence." The makeshift Matryoshka structure began to stabilize, forming a cocoon around Vincent and the precious shard. As reality continued to unravel beyond its boundaries, within this fragile shelter, the first tentative steps towards a new cosmic order were taking shape. Vincent focused his entire being on this singular purpose: to preserve, to nurture, to rebuild. The task before him was monumental, perhaps impossible, but he had faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. As the last echoes of the old universe faded away, Vincent Coleman stood vigil over the ember of humanity's future. The shard pulsed in rhythm with his unwavering will, a beacon of hope in the face of oblivion. If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video, then leave a comment that says, "I like the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.